Chapter 139. In the eyes of the dark world, Shinjuku was undoubtedly the most famous place in Dongdu. Not only was the Dongdu government located in Shinjuku, but also the headquarters or extremely important branches of the major gangs in East Island. It was also the place with the densest special warfare agencies in East Island. In this small area, there were nearly 60 special warfare agencies gathered together, with the names of certain companies or societies in front of everyone. What was equally interesting was that Kabukicho, known as the largest red light district in Asia, was also located in Shinjuku. Nearly 6,000 bars, clubs, and massage parlors were crowded together, which was a paradise for all men. Crooks mixed with honest people. This was the current situation of Shinjuku. Walking on the streets of Shinjuku, there were only 5 kinds of people you would most likely encounter: tourists from all over the world, East Island government personnel, gang members, prostitutes, and East Island agents. This was Shinjuku, mixed but not chaotic, a funny and somewhat incredible place. From morning to night, the heavy rain in Dongdu continued, and it was even getting heavier. There were no crowds on the streets of Shinjuku, but the traffic was endless. All kinds of neon lights were flashing on the streets, and the whole Shinjuku looked a kind of blurred temptation. In the heavy rain, a young man with an umbrella walked into a roadside restaurant with a slightly hurried pace. He put away the umbrella in his hand, found a table at random, and sat down. The young man's appearance was ordinary. At best, his clean and delicate face would not attract any attention in the crowd. However, his eyes were extremely bright, and his expression was calm and gentle. He was carrying a long silver metal box on his back as he sat on the seat with a peaceful expression. Perhaps it was because of the weather, the business in the restaurant was extremely quiet. Seeing that there were guests coming in, a waitress with faint freckles on her face and a pretty and decent appearance walked over quickly and said something in Japanese with a gentle and respectful tone. The young man, who looked less than 20 years old, opened his mouth, pointed to his mouth, and smiled. His eyes were clear and a little apologetic, and he seemed to be mute. The waitress was stunned, and she felt a little sorry for him for no reason. She bowed to him and handed the menu to the young mute in front of her with both hands. Mute opened the menu but did not look at it in detail. After pointing at the Japanese-style hot pot on the menu, he seemed to feel that it was not enough. However, due to his lack of money, he could not afford to order more meat. He simply ordered a few rice balls and then handed the menu back to the waiter. The waiter silently noted it down. She told him to wait for a moment before turning around and entering the kitchen. The young man seemed to be mute, but he wasn't deaf. After nodding, he took out a neatly folded piece of information from his pocket and silently read it. Sanluan Tingjing, male, 39 years old, was originally a senior priest of Amaterasu Shrine, a standard militarist, and the current leader of Spirit Moon Special Operations Team. He is at the peak of the fire-flaming realm. He is perverse and cruel, fond of women. He has tortured and killed many women in the name of a priest. He is a complete psychopath. A short summary was written at the top of the document, and below the summary was a photo less than 2 inches in size. A middle-aged man with a hazy expression appeared in the photo with narrowed eyes, making people feel extremely uncomfortable. Below the photo was the recent information about Sanluan Tingjing and his current residence. The young mute narrowed his eyes and watched silently, not saying a word for a long time. "Penman, are you in Shinjuku?" There was a rustling sound in his ears, and then Bai Yoming's voice came directly through a micro-communication device. The young mute glanced around calmly. It was raining heavily outside, and he was the only one in the restaurant at this time. An East Island man, who looked to be in his 40s or 50s, was calculating the accounts behind the counter. It seemed that he was the owner of the restaurant. He lowered his eyelids and answered calmly, Sanluan Tingjing? Bai Yoming's voice came again. The communication device in Li Tianlan's ear was actually a translator, with a remote communication and positioning device. Li Tianlan didn't understand Japanese, so he hunted alone in East Island. Language was a great trouble most of the time. This translation device could be said to be what he needed most in East Island. The device was small in size and could be stuffed into the ear, but the signal was extremely sharp and clear. Within a range of 20 meters, as long as it was not whispering, the translator could basically collect all the information and give feedback. It was even more convenient than a real ear. Li Tianlan was acting alone. He didn't need to speak at all. He just needed to be able to listen. This little thing was just right for him. Sanluan Tingjing. Bai Yuming hesitated a little and said softly, "That's the power of the shrine." Now, the young waiter had brought the hot pot over. Li Tianlan ate in silence and didn't speak. He didn't wonder why Bai Yuming knew the goal of his trip. In the hunting operation, Yi Fengqing divided about 90 assassination targets, accounting for half of the total quota of 180 people. Wang Shengxiao, Gu Hanshan, and Li Tianlan each got 30 people. Although the people were different, the difficulty was roughly the same. Intentionally or unintentionally, Yi Fengqing didn't consider the realm gap between Li Tianlan and the first two. If it wasn't because Director Yi expected and valued Li Tianlan, then the meaning behind it was somewhat meaningful. The list of 90 people assigned by the three of them was far more important than the 90 people behind them. There were many masters and they weighed a lot. If all the 90 people were successfully hunted, as the nodes disappeared one after another, the net woven by the East Island government would be mostly paralyzed. As for the other 90 people, they might be important, but their strength was relatively average, and their backgrounds were more complicated. It was most suitable for other trainees to hunt such people, and it wouldn't take up too much of the three of them's energy. In the list Li Tianlan got, there were 13 people in East Island at this time, and the rest were scattered in cities such as Ninghu, Changdao, Sendai, and Nagoya. Among the 13 people in Dongdu, 4 of them were in Shinjuku, occupying 4 directions respectively. Sanluan Tingjing was in the north of Shinjuku. Since Bai Yuming could see his location information, it was not difficult to guess who he was going to attack. "It's okay." Li Tianlan took a bite of meat and said in a very low voice. The power of the shrine in East Island was extremely powerful. This was originally a country with a high theocratic status. Although the theocratic status of East Island was under the regime and the imperial power, it was definitely a force that could not be ignored. Shintoism, Amaterasu Shrine, Ise Grand Shrine, Ishikami Shrine, and all kinds of shrines stood in great numbers, which could be regarded as a force that could not be ignored in the special warfare system of East Island. A large number of shrines in East Island had very close ties with Yasukuni Shrine, which represented the militarists of the right-wing forces. Over the years, they had even united with the right-wing forces. It could be said that they were the most radical forces inside East Island. At present, with the destruction of Night Spirit, East Island's right to speak in the Dark World had also suffered a major or even a heavy blow. The government of East Island was likely to select some people and release them after integrating the foundation of Night Spirit in East Island. The right-wing forces and the Shrine forces were not suitable to hold important positions on the surface because they were too radical, but the Dark World was definitely the best stage for them to play. The fact that Sanluan Tingjing controlled the Spirit Moon Special Operations Group was a signal. The Spirit Moon Special Operations Group was not a behemoth, and its level was not too high. Seriously speaking, it was at most equivalent to an agency at the level of a department or bureau in Zhongzhou State. But the Spirit Moon Special Operations Group was extremely special. It was a semi-official organization. To put it bluntly, it was one of the local dark forces of East Island. What was the Dark World? It was not a real world. To be exact, wherever there were people of the Dark World, there was the Dark World. It was the same as where there were people, there would be Jianghu. In the hearts of ordinary people, this world was an ordinary, calm, and bright world. But in the eyes of some killers, agents, mercenaries, and so on, this world was the Dark World everywhere. The purpose of the Spirit Moon Special Operations Group was to deal with the masters of the Dark World with bad intentions in East Island. Under normal circumstances, there were only about 100 elites and staff in the Spirit Moon Special Operations Group. But as long as it was needed, countless masters of the special warfare system in East Island could enter these similar semi-official organizations and contribute to the country in their own names. The Spirit Moon Special Operations Group had even been borrowed by a master of the Invincible Realm. The importance of such an organization was self-evident. Li Tianlan put Sanluan Tingjing first on the hunting list, not only because Sanluan Tingjing's strength and position added up to 200 credits. After carefully watching the 13 preys in Dongdu, he had a general plan in his mind. Among the 13 people, there was one master at the peak of the Thundershocking Realm and 2 masters at the stabilization phase of the Thundershocking Realm. 2 masters at the fulfillment of the Fire-Flaming Realm. 4 masters at the Fire-Flaming Realm. As for the remaining 4, one was in the Ice-Condensing Realm, and the other 3 were ordinary people who didn't know martial arts. Not to mention the Dongdu area, there were not many masters of the Thundershocking Realm and the Fire-Flaming Realm on the complete list of 30 people in his hand. The reason why he chose Sanluan Tingjing was that his strength was high enough. It was better to kill him in the early stage of such a tricky task. Otherwise, when the 3 of them hunted all over East Island would be shocked, and some smart people would figure out their purpose. At that time, if they planned to assassinate the masters on the list, it would be a little difficult. Fire-Flaming Realm and Thundershocking Realm. Li Tianlan thought about these 2 realms, which could be regarded as masters anywhere, and there was a dead silence in his eyes. At the beginning of the hunt, he had already taken the surge potion that Qin Weibai brought back for him through Horsewoman. In the following period, he would always have the strength of the stabilization phase of the Fire-Flaming Realm. Although it was still 1 or 2 small realms lower than his previous peak strength, he had made a major breakthrough in the Qi-controlling realm before he set off from the Sky Academy. Now, during the period of the effect of the potion, if Li Tianlan gave it his all, he was not sure how terrifying his combat capability would be. Sanluan Tingjing. Li Tianlan looked at the photo on the information in his hand, narrowed his eyes, and smiled. Not only Sanluan Tingjing, but the entire theocratic force in East Island would be his priority hunting target this time. First, he would destroy the arrogance of this powerful force with a deep foundation in East Island, which would be of great benefit to his next action. In a word, you must be careful. Yi Fengqing, the old fox, and the little fox of the Wang family of Beihai pushed you to this point together. If you can't do it, you can just withdraw. Those 2 people don't have good intentions. Bai Yuming continued. Li Tianlan gave a soft hum again. Bai Yuming suddenly changed the topic and said playfully, I forgot to tell you that people from the Deep Sea Academy are here. Well, Rushi is beside me. She wants to talk to you. Do you want to have a chat? You are engaged. Although you haven't seen each other, it's good to cultivate a relationship first. Li Tianlan stopped breathing, and his eyes were complicated. There was a silence on the other end of the communication, and then a cold but tender voice sounded. It was soft and sounded a little complicated. Qin Weibai's voice was also very cold, but compared with this voice, it had 2 different styles. Qin Weibai was really cold and indifferent, with a kind of high and mighty holiness and ethereal. But now this voice was still cold, but there was a kind of indescribable arrogance in it. Her voice seemed to be deliberately soft, but the arrogance was still clear and obvious. Be careful. Be careful. Dongqing Rushi said. It seemed that she had done her duty as a fiancée. The next second, she directly cut off the communication. Dongqing Rushi. Chapter 140. After a big dinner, before the restaurant closed, Li Tianlan walked into the rain again with an umbrella. The humidity was thick in the night. The rainstorm was getting heavier and heavier, and the bean-sized raindrops fell on the umbrella. The umbrella trembled violently, making people feel unsteady. The street lights on the cold road were still on, and there was dense water vapor beside the light, making it hazy. The whole Takeshita Street seemed to be isolated from the world in the heavy rain. Li Tianlan walked on the street unhurriedly with an umbrella, looking lonely and lonely. Takeshita Street was a clear stream in Shinjuku. Located in the north of Shinjuku, the road was wide. Not to mention when it was raining, even in the cloudless day, this street could be said to be the coldest and quietest street in Dongdu. There were no messy bars and clubs on the street. There were no noisy gangs. There were only a few restaurants, shops, a supermarket, and a small and medium-sized hospital. In addition to these necessary living places, the entire Takashita Street was only left with some companies and societies that occupied a large area but did not even have a clear introduction of the specific work. These companies and societies that did not even have clear basic responsibilities were the real masters of Takashita Street, or the protagonists. There were a total of 56 special warfare agencies in the Shinjuku area of Tokyo, and more than 30 of them had their headquarters set up on Takashita Street. Nearly 5,000 special warfare operations personnel and special warfare intelligence personnel lived here, trained, and lived. When there was no large-scale operation, the whole clean street looked cold and desolate. More than 5,000 special warfare system personnel. If all of them were dispatched, Takashita Street might become a real dragnet in an instant. Li Tianlan walked quietly along the street. His expression was getting calmer and calmer, and the road ahead was getting darker and darker. The street lights hundreds of meters ahead were completely out. Li Tianlan stopped. The street lights on Takashita Street were on for 300 meters, and the rest was completely dark, which meant that he had officially entered the densest area of special warfare forces on Takashita Street. This kind of darkness was liked by all killers, but the place in front of him was obviously not suitable for lurking, because in the darkness ahead, at least tens of thousands of high-definition cameras scattered in different positions were working 24 hours a day, covering the second half of Takashita Street for thousands of meters. It was a complete joke to lurk in such a place. The street was silent and strange, and there seemed to be only the sound of rain between heaven and earth. Li Tianlan stopped where he was, leaning against the wall. In the heavy rain, lightning streaked across the sky, followed by muffled thunder. At the moment when the sky and earth turned pale under the lightning, Li Tianlan loosened the umbrella in his hand and casually pulled off the pitch-black umbrella cover. The torrential rain fell instantly. Li Tianlan, who was already in the fire-flaming realm, did not use flames to evaporate the rain around him. He saved every bit of his combat strength and let the rain drench his whole body. He took out the silver box that he had been carrying on his back. He covered part of it with a pitch-black umbrella and wrapped the other part with a black coat. After doing all this, he put the box back on his back and quickly moved forward while sticking close to the wall. A flurry of footsteps could be heard in the torrential rain. Li Tianlan's figure suddenly stopped where he was, but the little puddle of water under his feet instantly whistled forward. The ripples kept spreading forward, pushing the water higher and higher, and countless water droplets flew in the torrential rain. A patrol team in ponchos came out silently from a narrow alley less than 30 meters ahead. Although they looked a little tired, their formation was not chaotic at all. In the second half of Takashita Street, companies were separated from each other, and there were such small alleys everywhere in the middle. This was undoubtedly the most dangerous hidden danger for security, so the major Secret Service agencies could only form a joint patrol team to patrol every alley 24 hours a day. It was said that many special warfare agencies had jointly issued an application to the Dongdu city government, requesting to demolish the residents in this alley and build the second half of Takashita Street into an integrated large-scale industrial park. To put it bluntly, it was a super-large training ground, so that the major Secret Service agencies could gather together completely without any hindrance. This report not only went to the Dongdu city government, but also to the cabinet. The cabinet had approved it, and nearby residents had begun to move. Once this plan was formed, the patrol force in the second half of Takashita Street would be greatly reduced, but the degree of safety would be greatly improved, and the difficulty of sneaking would skyrocket. But before the demolition was completed, every patrol team had to stick to their duties. With the rigid and serious nature of East Islanders in their bones, even if they were patrolling in their own territory, every patrol team would show the vigilance of a war. A lot of water splashed into the entrance of the alley with the raindrops. A patrol team of 5 people happened to appear. Countless splashes of water splashed on the raincoats of the patrol team, and the wind whistled. "What's that?" There was a cry of surprise, and the 5 people turned their heads at the same time to look in the direction from which the water splashed. And Li Tianlan, who had been standing there, had disappeared. In the alley behind the patrol team, the splashes gathered and turned into a shadow. Li Tianlan's figure had changed places with the shadow, clinging to the wall, motionless. The patrol team muttered, and they didn't think much about it since they didn't see anything and continued to patrol. Li Tianlan clung to the wall and moved quickly in the alley, constantly approaching his target location. The Spirit Moon Special Warfare Group was in the middle and front part of the second half of Takeshita Street, about a kilometer away from here. After more than a dozen alleys, he would almost arrive there. Li Tianlan moved quickly and kept changing places with the shadow. His figure was never exposed in the open space. He was always clinging to the wall, with his back against the wall behind him, avoiding the few commanding heights nearby, and kept moving forward. Elite patrols, densely packed cameras, and a sniper on a high vantage point. If he was discovered by any one of them, he would be exposed at the first time, and he would even face the encirclement and interception of more than 5,000 elites in the shortest time. Li Tianlan didn't want to see the target not die, but things had come to this point. Moreover, Sanluan Tingjing was cruel and cunning. If the assassination failed this time, it would be even more difficult to kill him in the future. At that time, it would be more difficult to kill him than today. There was another flurry of footsteps. Li Tianlan's shadow swayed slightly, and he disappeared quickly. Now his shadow formula could be said to have reached the basic level in terms of power and change. The distance of the shadow released was about 40 meters. As long as he was careful enough and used the shadow formula here, the possibility of him being discovered was very small. Passing by the second patrol team, Li Tianlan didn't stop and continued to move forward. The direction and terrain of this trip kept appearing in his mind, as if a map was gradually becoming clear and complete. Kill with one blow. Retreat and scathe. How could he retreat? He moved forward in the alley, observing the surrounding terrain, silently remembering the movement patterns of the patrol team, and then working out the retreat route before taking action. This was what an excellent assassin should do. Li Tianlan was not an assassin before. But now he was on an assassination mission, so he was an assassin. The surrounding alleys were gradually restored in his mind. Li Tianlan's pace was getting faster and faster, and he deliberately avoided the commanding heights all the way. After passing by 6 patrol teams, he finally entered the factory of the Spirit Moon Society. The layout of the factory was clean and elegant, with all the woods and flower beds. Li Tianlan moved along the woods and finally stopped at the forefront of the woods. 200 meters in front of him was a villa, which was brightly lit. But what made Li Tianlan frown slightly was that the distance of 200 meters was empty except for a flower bed in the middle. The nearby snipers might not react very quickly, but it was impossible for them to let him rush over a distance of 200 meters without discovering his existence. He had to be fast. Li Tianlan tightened the box on his back and took a deep breath. After a nearby patrol team passed by, he suddenly rushed out of the woods. The distance of 5 meters was crossed almost in one step. 30 meters away, a shadow was formed. Switch. Changing positions. Li Tianlan's figure flickered in an instant. 3 shadows appeared and disappeared almost at the same time, and Li Tianlan's figure had appeared inside the flower bed 100 meters away. Li Tianlan's breathing was slightly rapid. Releasing 3 shadows in a row didn't consume much of his physical strength, but it consumed a lot of his willpower. But in the flower bed, his eyes were getting brighter and brighter. After a short rest, Li Tianlan's figure moved, and another shadow was about to rise. A beam of light came directly from outside the factory. A black car cut through the rain. A black Lexus entered the factory and finally stopped in front of the villa in the middle of the factory. The door opened, and 2 men in black suits got out with umbrellas. They opened the driver's compartment in the back of the car, took out 2 oversized suitcases from inside, and walked quickly into the villa. The moment the door of the villa closed, a shadow appeared on the side of the car, perfectly avoiding the commanding heights. After a short rest, another shadow appeared on the rooftop of the villa. Li Tianlan, dressed in black, lay tightly on the rooftop and moved slowly. The rain was heavy. But now, as long as the snipers at the nearby commanding heights paid a little attention to him, even through the rain curtain, it was not difficult to find Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan opened the silver box behind him. Instead of taking the sky attack, he pulled out a small metal cylinder from the box, stretched it out, and gently inserted it into the ceiling. The cylinder suddenly pierced the hard ceiling, like a knife cutting tofu, silently. The signal light above the cylinder lit up, and Li Tianlan turned on a small screen temporarily installed inside the box. Through the ceiling, everything in the villa suddenly appeared on the screen. A middle-aged man whom Li Tianlan was familiar with but looked gloomier in real life than in photos appeared on the screen, with a cruel and perverted smile. Sanluan Tingjing. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes slightly and remained calm. Two men in black suits carrying large suitcases had entered the villa and bowed deeply to Sanluan Tingjing. "Open it," Sanluan Tingjing said with a smile. "Let me see the toys tonight." The two men in black suits squatted down with smiling faces and opened the box directly. Sure enough, there were toys in the box. Two slender women in shorts were curled up in the suitcase, revealing their snow-white and tender thighs. They were struggling with all their might. Their mouths were taped shut, and they could only make muffled sounds. Their eyes were filled with terror. "Priest, these are two women from Zhongzhou State. They came to East Island to travel. Are you satisfied with them?" A man in a black suit said carefully with a smiling face. Sanluan Tingjing smiled, squatted down, grabbed the long black hair of a woman in the box, lifted her up, and tore off the tape on her mouth. The woman screamed subconsciously. Sanluan Tingjing had already bent down and kissed the woman's rosy little mouth hard. The woman's eyes widened, and her pure and beautiful face had been completely deformed. Her eyes were full of fear. Sanluan Tingjing bit hard, and the woman's lips suddenly bled. He licked the blood on the corner of his mouth slightly and said with a sinister smile, "Yes, Ashina Sao. It's most interesting to torture and kill." Torture and kill? When the woman heard this word, she trembled more and more severely. "You two stay and play together." Sanluan Tingjing smiled, looked at the two women in front of him, and said softly, "The rain outside is too heavy. Don't be afraid. I'll play a game with you tonight. It's a very fun game." Bang! At the same time, a dull and violent gunshot, which could only belong to a sniper rifle, suddenly sounded outside the window. Li Tianlan rolled over subconsciously. In his original position, gravel splashed, and a bullet hole appeared directly. Bang! The second shot sounded again. Without hesitation, Li Tianlan grabbed the box with the sky attack on his back and punched the ceiling directly. Boom! Chapter 141. The whole villa kept shaking under the tremendous force. The ceiling had been completely cracked. Huge stones, dust, and heavy rain fell in the hall at the same time. A black figure fell along with the falling rocks. Sanluan Tingjing's pupils had contracted to the limit. In his sight, there was only a sharp silver light. The human emperor, which was more than 2 meters long, was fully extended. It cut through the air and stabbed directly at Sanluan Tingjing's head with a harsh whistling sound. It was raining heavily. A solo attack. The silver spear tip pointed straight down, and the curved spear blades on both sides of the spear tip had been completely opened. The whole spear body showed an indescribable coldness and elegance, dangerous and violent. The spear body stabbed straight down, and all the gravel turned into powder in an instant. The raindrops had condensed into icicles before they fell to the ground, surrounding Sanluan Tingjing's whole body. Fast. Everything happened in an instant. It was as fast as the wind and as powerful as the thunder. At the critical moment of life and death, Sanluan Tingjing was an expert at the peak of the fire-flaming realm. With a roar, he pulled out a sharp, soft sword from his waist in an instant. His arms swept across, and the fire scattered. The icicles that trapped him in place melted instantly, and the long spear above him arrived. Sanluan Tingjing slightly leaned sideways, and the silver spear almost stuck close to his body and stabbed straight down. The sharp spear light cut through his skin and instantly left a deep wound on his face. The long spear sank 1/2 meter into the ground. Before Li Tianlan's body landed on the ground, his hand holding the long spear suddenly lifted. In an instant, the silver light whistled up. Bang! On the ground, The floor with a radius of several meters was lifted up by Li Tianlan's spear. The wooden floor vibrated wildly, and countless pieces of wood and stones almost covered the sky and the earth and smashed towards Sanluan Tingjing. This coherent. From top to bottom, and then from bottom to top, there was no pause. Sanluan Tingjing didn't even have time to breathe. Before the momentum of the spear fell, the human emperor had drawn a cold arc like a full moon and smashed directly at his head. Damn it! Sanluan Tingjing roared angrily and quickly retreated. The long spear suddenly stopped, and the spear head lit up. Li Tianlan held the spear with one hand and strode forward. Straight stab. Church. Torrential rain fell from the broken ceiling into the hall. The rain on Li Tianlan's body had completely evaporated. The dazzling fire bloomed on the spear, surging with endless heat. Shadow formula. Switch positions. The 2-meter-long spear appeared in front of Sanluan Tingjing in an instant. Sanluan Tingjing's expression changed dramatically. In his sight, the comely and calm face was instantly drawn closer. Everything in front of him seemed to have disappeared, and all he could see was Li Tianlan's eyes. It was a pair of eyes that shone brightly, revealing its sharpness, but also burning with endless madness and determination. It was a killing intent that would not hesitate to sacrifice anything. It was an indomitable will, one that would not retreat even in the face of death. Invincible. An invincible person, an invincible spear, an invincible momentum, and an invincible killing intent. The ferocious spearhead was less than 30 centimeters away from Sanluan Tingjing's chest. Blazing sun. Sanluan Tingjing's eyes suddenly condensed like never before, and the surging flames burst out all over his body. His slightly short body suddenly made a strange turn to avoid the spear. The soft sword in his hand was straightened directly, and the flames soared. Spin! Sanluan Tingjing's body almost touched the silver spear. He took a step toward Li Tianlan and raised his arm. The long sword with surging flames swept toward Li Tianlan. A calm and indifferent voice suddenly sounded. There was only one syllable, which sounded like the Chinese of the Xina people he hated most. Stop! With the place where the two men fought as the center, the air in the hall suddenly twisted and stilled for a moment. The Buddhist incantation of 9 words, stop formula. The flames on the soft sword in Sanluan Tingjing's hand suddenly paused. The blue veins on Li Tianlan's arm bulged, and the hand holding the silver spear pressed down with all its strength. Crack! In the clear sound of bones cracking, the silver spear weighing more than 50 kilograms pressed hard on Sanluan Tingjing's shoulder, and the shoulder bone broke without any suspense. Under the severe pain, Sanluan Tingjing screamed and subconsciously knelt on the ground. Wait! Before he could say a word, Li Tianlan had kicked him directly in the chest. Bang! Sanluan Tingjing's body shook violently, and his short body suddenly rose into the air. Blood spurted from his mouth and fell on the wall. Li Tianlan, who had never talked nonsense from beginning to end, did not stop the momentum of his spear at all. He switched places with the shadow for the 3rd time. The tip of the spear appeared in front of Sanluan Tingjing in the blink of an eye. At the moment when the high priest of Amaterasu's shrine opened his eyes subconsciously, the long spear rushed over. The silver tip of the spear pierced into his chest, and the blade of the spear went deep into his skin. It pierced through his chest and came out through his chest. The tip of the spear pierced into the wall through Sanluan Tingjing's body. The wall full of steel bars and concrete collapsed in an instant. All the steel bars bent like soft bread under the great force, and then broke completely. A big hole was broken in the whole wall. Bricks and stones flew. The dust fell in an instant. Sanluan Tingjing, who seemed to want to say something, was lying in the ruins with his mouth open, but his vitality had completely disappeared. The heavy rain once again soaked Li Tianlan from head to toe. Li Tianlan squinted at the body of Sanluan Tingjing in the ruins, narrowed his eyes and whispered, "Let's talk on the way." Sanluan Tingjing opened his mouth wide, and his eyes were filled with horror. From beginning to end, this core figure of the Shinto force of East Island didn't even know why he died. Second, from breaking the wall to the death of Sanluan Tingjing, the whole process took less than 5 seconds. The villa had become a dangerous house, and the owner of the villa had died. Li Tianlan had no time to waste. Every second he stayed here meant more danger for him, so he didn't bother to talk nonsense with Sanluan Tingjing. He went all out as soon as he made a move. The shadow formula switched positions, and the stop formula killed. In an instant, everything was done in one go. The whole assassination process was extremely violent and smooth, without any hindrance. It was hearty. This was a real one-hit kill. Behind Li Tianlan, the two men in suits who were responsible for kidnapping the two Zhongzhou girls and looking forward to staying and playing with them finally reacted. They screamed and fled from the main entrance. Li Tianlan didn't even bother to look at them. He carried the human emperor and left directly through the hole in the wall in front of him. "Wait a minute, please." Behind him, a soft voice filled with fear and sobbing sounded. It was not very standard Japanese. Li Tianlan kept moving forward with no expression on his face. "Wait a minute, please." The soft voice continued to ring, but this time it was in Chinese. Li Tianlan stopped but did not turn around. The girl who asked for help behind him was surprised. In a dangerous situation, she had the joy of meeting an old friend in a foreign land. She held another companion in the box who seemed to have been hit in the leg by a stone and begged, "Please, help us. We are also from Zhongzhou State." Li Tianlan twitched the corner of his mouth and said calmly, "There is a car outside the main entrance. You can drive it and escape. The people here are probably looking for me now, so the defense is simple. Whether you can survive or not depends on your luck." He took a deep breath and said no more. He left the villa directly through the hole, never looking at the two Zhongzhou girls behind him, and didn't care about their life or death. A hero saving the damsel in distress? What a ridiculous idea. If Li Tianlan was just an ordinary Zhongzhou tourist, he might help them in this kind of situation. But what was his identity now? He was a special agent of Zhongzhou State who was on a top-secret mission in East Island. How could he save them? How dare he save them? Not only could he not save them, but what he should do now was to turn around and kill the two girls. He didn't mind saving them, but Zhongzhou State couldn't bear the consequences. The identities of these two girls were extremely transparent and clean, and such people were the easiest to investigate. Once Li Tianlan saved them, it would be a piece of cake for the East Island government to find out who Li Tianlan was. It wouldn't be so terrible if he was exposed. But if East Island operated secretly and got him together with Zhongzhou State, it would be a conspiracy and wrestling between countries. And such a fight had always been extremely bloody and tragic. In this plot of Zhongzhou State, the size of the Snowdance Corps had reached nearly 20,000 people. Once these people went out of the country, no matter whether they succeeded or failed, the high-level officials of Zhongzhou State would never admit that they had anything to do with Zhongzhou State. Naturally, no one would believe such a denial. But the important thing was that it was a reason. No matter how bullshit the reason was, it was a reason, and East Island couldn't produce any evidence. This was the fig leaf of the fight in the dark world. And once he saved the two girls, once East Island found out about them, they were very likely to take the initiative to tear down the fig leaf of Zhongzhou State and slap their faces. On the one hand, it was the young lives of the two girls. On the other hand, it was the position of Zhongzhou State in the dark world in the next few decades. What was national affairs? What was the overall situation? What was the choice? This kind of choice was cruel, but this was the general trend. He had to go with the flow and couldn't help it. Li Tianlan took a deep breath. He was not so cold-blooded as to kill people to keep their mouths shut for the time being. But he really couldn't save the two girls behind. They were on their own. Li Tianlan held the gun faster and faster, from walking to trotting, and then to striding. Every second counted. The night rain was like a curtain. The heavy rain was like a waterfall. The rain washed the silver body of the gun, and the blood gradually disappeared. In the messy footsteps, a patrol team of 5 people appeared directly in front of Li Tianlan. The human emperor closed in an instant. At the moment when no one raised the muzzle, Li Tianlan had already rushed through the formation of the 5 people. Under the heavy rain, the 5 elites stood quietly in the same place, holding their guns, motionless. Li Tianlan's figure had rushed into the woods, as fast as lightning. Spirit Moon Special Operations Group was a semi-official special warfare agency of East Island, and it was also a special warfare agency belonging to Night Spirit. Countless experts in East Island had changed their identities in special operations groups like Spirit Moon. They were transformed into the elites of the special warfare system of East Island, or the elites of Night Spirit, or the free men of the Dark World. This position, which was not a high-ranking but extremely sensitive one, was bound to change hands after tonight. As for what Zhongzhou State could get from this change of ownership, it was not Li Tianlan's concern at all. Spirit Moon Special Operations Group was very important. Sanluan Tingjing was also very important in his hunting target of this trip. But he was not the most important one. Even in Dongdu, in Shinjuku, Sanluan Tingjing was not the most important one. Li Tianlan shuttled quickly through the woods. The first hunting target had been completed. Chapter 142. The entire Takeshita Street took emergency actions in the heavy rain. In the villa of the headquarters at the end of the street, orders were issued one after another. Not only the patrol squads, but also some of the East Island special warfare elites, who had fallen asleep in the heavy rain, gathered for the first time and rushed to the location of the Spirit Moon Society. Encirclement, interception, inescapable net. Over Takeshita Street, a military low-altitude satellite with super high resolution had been fully turned on. In an instant, the picture of every corner of Takeshita Street appeared on the big screen of the headquarters at the same time. Orders were issued one after another, becoming more precise and effective. The footsteps were loud and messy. A large number of patrols rushed into the woods of the Spirit Moon Society without hesitation and directly killed the target according to the orders they received. Under the woods, the heavy rain fell down. Blood flew up. The heavy rain did not stop, and the blood did not stop. The silver human emperor had turned into two swords. The sharp silver-white sword light and sword momentum were like a tide. As the crowd surged, they constantly flew in all directions. Wherever the sword light passed, all the trees and grasses were burning fiercely. The fire burned more and more fiercely in the heavy rain within a range of tens of meters. Some people were buried in the sea of fire, but more people were smashed by the sword light. Move forward, keep moving forward. Li Tianlan's eyes were unprecedentedly focused and bright, and the fighting intent was burning in his pupils like a raging fire. Everything in front of him was directly torn apart in the raging sword light. He moved faster and faster, and his momentum and killing intent were getting more and more violent. This was a retreat. This was an escape. But on him, there was a kind of momentum as if thousands of troops and horses were charging forward. The killing intent was majestic and unstoppable. More and more squads gathered in the direction of Li Tianlan's breakout. In his sight, the woods were coming to an end. Rushing out of the woods, it was the outside world that was densely packed with twists and turns. Li Tianlan's eyes narrowed slightly, and he held his swords tightly. Tens of meters ahead, at least 7 or 8 patrol squads gathered together roared at the same time. The endless heavy rain stopped, and an ice wall more than 20 meters long and at least 10 meters thick instantly blocked in front of Li Tianlan. "Idiot! What are you doing? He is on your left." The moment the ice wall rose, the commanders in the command center who were watching the encirclement through the big screen were the first to jump up and curse. The moment the ice wall rose, everyone only saw Li Tianlan's body shake. His body seemed to be still in the same place, but the real him had appeared dozens of meters away. Only a shadow stood where he originally stood, and after a few seconds, it dissipated. Shadow. In the command room, the oldest commander frowned. "Everyone, don't you think this scene is very familiar?" The other commanders were stunned. Sai City, Zhongzhou State, Lord of Shadow, Tribulation. The old commander said coldly and narrowed his eyes. The moment he switched places with his shadow, a second shadow appeared in front of him. Li Tianlan's figure flickered again, and he had already rushed out of the woods and into an alley. Boundless sea and sky? Just as Li Tianlan relaxed, the next second, endless light suddenly lit up, turning from extreme darkness to extreme brightness. In an instant, Li Tianlan was in a trance. Countless rays of light flashed in front of him, but they were meaningless. In the second half of Takeshita Street, every alley was lit up. This was not an ordinary light, but a bright and dazzling light like a searchlight. The dark alley suddenly turned into a dazzling whiteness. Standing in the alley, Li Tianlan was really like a firefly in the night, so conspicuous that he couldn't be more conspicuous. Bang! The sound of a large-caliber heavy sniper rifle sounded. At the same time as the gunshot sounded, Li Tianlan had quickly moved to the side. Bang! There was a big hole in the wall where he originally stood. Li Tianlan was surrounded by bright light and could not see anything. He could only hear the sound to identify the position of the sniper. But in this area of thousands of meters, there were nearly 400 snipers. In the case that he could not see, even if Li Tianlan could hear the sound to identify the position, he was in an extremely dangerous situation. Before the second gunshot sounded, Li Tianlan's figure moved slightly, and his whole body became chaotic in an instant. Small steps forward, big steps forward, small steps left, small steps back. In an instant, countless shadows flickered around Li Tianlan. His every movement was never repeated. In a trance, in the sniper's scope, the snipers could not tell whether Li Tianlan was moving forward or backward. Shoot! A gloomy order sounded in the ears of every sniper. How could they shoot without aiming? All the snipers tried to aim at Li Tianlan. Before the second order sounded, the sniper closest to Li Tianlan could not hold back and pulled the trigger. Bang! The long and narrow bullet shot at Li Tianlan, but it fell 3 meters away from him. Li Tianlan seemed to be motionless, but his body kept moving forward. Suddenly, his figure had entered another alley. Some snipers suddenly lost their target vision. The unique skill of Sai City, Desperate Chase. This unique skill, known as the first body movement in the Dark World in recent years, was impeccable in both dodging and attacking, especially when he had the advantage of realm. Facing a group of snipers who were at most in the ice-condensing realm or even the chi-controlling realm, as long as Li Tianlan was not courting death, the snipers could not aim at him at all. Fire at the same time. No need to aim. Shoot. The second irascible order echoed in every sniper's ears. Bang, bang, bang. Countless gunshots suddenly enveloped the alley where Li Tianlan was. Li Tianlan's figure paused. I hit him. A surprised voice sounded, but before his voice died away, Li Tianlan, who was frozen in place, had disappeared. Damn, it's the shadow again. What the hell is this? Where is he now? Who has his vision? The sniper's complaints kept ringing out. The atmosphere in the headquarters became more and more oppressive. A young commander looked ferocious and said coldly, just mobilize heavy firepower and flatten this area. I don't believe he can come out alive. Idiot! Don't you know how many civilians are nearby? With so many civilians dying, the Prime Minister is going to step down. Can you afford such consequences? Another commander retorted with an irritated look. The Prime Minister of East Island this time was full of courage, and amazing means. It could be said that he was their overall backer. If the Prime Minister was implicated, none of them would be well off. Heavy weapons are not advisable. The oldest commander narrowed his eyes, kept silent for a while and said slowly, I'll go. Several other commanders were shocked. You'll go in person? The other party is not weak. You may not be his match. I'll go, it's safer. The old commander took a deep breath and made up his mind. Without hesitation, he walked out of the headquarters and said loudly, Prepare the car. Tianlan, what's the situation on your side? Li Tianlan's figure had appeared in a yard next to the alley. He found a black plastic bag in the yard and covered his glasses, treating them as sunglasses. Just after he finished all this, Bai Yoming's voice sounded in his ears. It's okay. They are breaking out of the encirclement. I can handle it. Li Tianlan said calmly, there are just too many people. Don't worry. At the other end of the communication, Bai Yoming was silent for a moment and said softly, Horsewoman and Flaming Fire are ready to pick you up. Do you want? No need. Li Tianlan directly interrupted Bai Yoming and said calmly, I can break through here. Let's not talk about it now. Bai Yuming hesitated a little, and finally gritted her teeth and said, "In this case, you go left. We have hacked their satellite. Although we can't see the picture, we have already got the dynamics of their area. At present, the third alley on your left has the least guards. It's just the right place to break through." Li Tianlan said, switched places with the shadow again, and appeared in another yard. At this time, every alley was full of dazzling lights. Li Tianlan couldn't see anything, nor could those patrol squads. So they were smart enough to not come in at all. They just kept sending people to block the entrances of the alleys, waiting for them. Even if he didn't go out, as long as he was blocked inside, there would soon be a master coming in to catch him. Switching places with the shadow again, Li Tianlan's body appeared in the alley. The black plastic bag covered his eyes, and everything in front of him was vague. Li Tianlan didn't stop and sprinted in the alley. The snipers who had lost their vision fired again. A large number of bullets were shot from the front and back of Li Tianlan. His figure was sometimes fast and sometimes slow in the rain of bullets, but he never stopped. The bullets were getting denser and denser. In the heavy rain, several ice walls had appeared around Li Tianlan. Countless bullets hit the ice walls. The ice walls trembled and Li Tianlan's physical strength was constantly consumed. Bai Yuming, who couldn't see the picture at this time, said in a more urgent tone, "Tianlan, hurry up, we just got the information that Miyamoto Xianxia has left the headquarters and intends to kill you personally. Your direction of breaking through is exactly the same as his direction of advance." Miyamoto Xianxia. This was also a character on Li Tianlan's hunting list. In terms of strength and importance, Miyamoto Xianxia could be said to be in the top 3 on his hunting list. He was a master at the stabilization phase of the Thundershocking Realm, the left priest of Amaterasu Shrine, and now the person in charge of the Night Spirit Mansion. The Night Spirit Mansion could be said to be the most important institution of Night Spirit in Dongdu. It was responsible for contacting and leading everything in Dongdu. All the forces of Night Spirit in Dongdu, whether it was the underworld, consortium, special warfare agencies, or political forces, were all based on the Night Spirit Mansion. After the destruction of Night Spirit, Miyamoto Xianxia controlled the Night Spirit Mansion. For Zhongzhou State, this was a person who must be killed even at any cost. In Li Tianlan's current state, he didn't need to be afraid of a master at the stabilization phase of the Thundershocking Realm. But a Miyamoto Xianxia plus thousands of special warfare elites on Takeshita Street, Li Tianlan had no chance of winning. He must break through and he must be fast. Li Tianlan took a deep breath, and around him, the broken ice walls instantly condensed together. Li Tianlan didn't hide his figure. He took countless bullets from the sniper rifle, let his physical strength be consumed quickly, and rushed straight to the alley that Bai Yuming said. At the entrance of the alley, at least dozens of special warfare elites of East Island were gathered there, ready to fight. Li Tianlan's figure rose into the air. In his sight, a thick ice wall suddenly condensed and became thicker and thicker. Li Tianlan was in the air, holding 2 swords tightly. The fire all over the sky spread wildly with him as the core, and the whole alley became a blazing orange. The sword edge spun wildly with the diffusing fire, tearing the rain curtain and the sky. The 8th blade, burning heaven. Boom! At the entrance of the alley, the ice wall, which was at least more than 5 meters thick, collapsed instantly in the blazing fire. Countless huge ice cubes flew in all directions, and a large amount of blood flew high into the sky with the broken ice cubes. Li Tianlan rushed over with 2 swords in his hands. "Tianlan, hurry up." Bai Yuming took a deep breath and said in a hurry, "No hurry." Li Tianlan's figure rushed quickly, but he didn't leave Takeshita Street, but rushed directly to the depths of Takeshita Street. This time, it was a bold and unexpected move. Extreme and crazy. "What do you want to do?" Bai Yuming's sharp voice seemed to be screaming. "I don't want to do anything." Li Tianlan said calmly, "I just want to kill back." "You little madman. Little bastard. Who do you want to kill?" Chapter 143. Going against the wall. It was an unimaginable and crazy decision. It could be said to be soul-stirring. Although East Island was a small country, their special warfare system had always been one of the most elite forces in the Dark World. Although Li Tianlan didn't kill Sanluan Tingjing for a long time, thousands of elites had been fully mobilized. The first half of the street was filled with countless special warfare elites, and the second half was filled with masters of dozens of special warfare systems. There was a real iron wall in front and behind. Everyone was waiting for Li Tianlan to hit it himself. At least in the hearts of every East Island elite, the assassin who killed Priest Sanluan Tingjing could not leave tonight. But who could have thought that Li Tianlan had no intention of leaving at all? He rushed out of the alley and out of the encirclement. Li Tianlan didn't hesitate and went back directly. The two swords of the human emperor were put together and stretched out in a flash. A silver spear more than 2 meters long appeared in Li Tianlan's hand again. The heavy rain kept pouring on Takashita Street. Thunder and lightning cut through the sky at the same time. In the dark environment of the second half of the street, Li Tianlan held the spear in one hand and sprinted at full speed. How important was Miyamoto Xianxia, who controlled the Night Spirit Mansion? It was no exaggeration to say that the Night Spirit Mansion was the hub of all the forces of the Night Spirit organization in Dongdu. Everything of the Night Spirit in Dongdu was mediated by the Night Spirit Mansion. Controlling the members of the Night Spirit Mansion was equivalent to controlling the forces of the Night Spirit in Dongdu. The East Island government was very likely to push out the Shinto forces of East Island and build a second Night Spirit with the foundation left by the Night Spirit. Whether this plan succeeded or not, Miyamoto Xianxia would be an important figure in it. On Li Tianlan's hunting list, under the name Miyamoto Xianxia, there were many red dots. The hunting list in his hand was top secret. How many people had seen it? How many people were qualified to put red dots on this list? Such a thundershocking realm master with a special identity was worth 600 credits in this task of the Sky Academy, almost 4 times that of Sanluan Tingjing, which showed his importance. In the communication device in his ear, Bai Yoming's sharp voice was still ringing, but Li Tianlan turned a deaf ear. All the sounds disappeared in his ears, and the scenery on both sides of the street was constantly retreating. Li Tianlan's eyes gradually became dead, deep and quiet. A bright headlight cut through the night and rain in an instant. Hundreds of meters away, several cars with headlights on were rushing in Li Tianlan's direction at full speed. The two sides were 300 meters apart. The traffic did not stop. Li Tianlan kept going. The distance between them shortened rapidly. At this time, in this place where special warfare agencies gathered, even if it was not Miyamoto Xianxia who rushed out in a car, it was definitely a master who came to kill him. There was no need to stand on ceremony. Li Tianlan carried the sky attack on his back, held the long spear in his hand tightly, and rushed directly toward the vehicle hundreds of meters away. His speed was getting faster and faster. The fierce wind was whistling around him, and the falling rain was blown away by the strong wind. Li Tianlan's eyes were getting quieter and quieter. Essence, qi, and spirit had completely merged into one. 200 meters. 150 meters. 120 meters. 3 cars driving side by side finally found Li Tianlan with a silver spear in his hand. Priest Miyamoto, we found an assassin. He's rushing towards us. Ha, what a joke. Does he want to use his body to compete with our vehicle? Maybe the stupid Chinese people think that the quality of the cars we use is the same as those inferior vehicles exported to Zhongzhou State. In a black Toyota in the middle, Miyamoto Xianxia was expressionless. In his sight, the figure with endless fierceness and killing intent crashed straight over, moving forward with a momentum that was enough to tear everything. Change the formation of the vehicle and hit him directly. Miyamoto Xianxia said coldly, and his tone was cold and vicious. Kill him. With his voice, the position of the 3 cars that were originally arranged horizontally and side by side suddenly changed. The off-road vehicle on the left of the Toyota directly overtook Miyamoto Xianxia's car, and the vehicle on the right was slightly behind. The 3 cars changed from horizontal to vertical and suddenly accelerated. Miyamoto Xianxia quietly straightened his body, and his eyes were cold. This priest of the left, whose position was second only to the high priest in the Amaterasu shrine, was nearly 60 years old. His strength in the stabilization phase of the thundershocking realm was hopeless to continue to improve, but in recent years, his state had always been at the peak. The old man's hair had become sparse, and there were some wrinkles on his face. But his momentum did not show the slightest sign of aging. It was a kind of fierce and cold momentum, overflowing with sharpness, which could be called extraordinary. The off-road vehicle in the front row had blocked his sight, but in his mind, the figure holding a silver spear fearlessly charging became clearer and clearer. Idiot courting death. He gently raised the corner of his mouth and said indifferently. The distance between the two sides was getting closer and closer. 90 meters. 80 meters. Li Tianlan strode wildly and suddenly lifted the long spear in one hand. His body was completely stretched in an instant, and a dense sound like firecrackers suddenly sounded from him. In an instant, every joint of Li Tianlan's body was shaking wildly, and the sound was like thunder. The terrible power instantly condensed on his right hand holding the long spear. Li Tianlan rushed forward with the spear. Vibration. Countless joints were still shaking violently, densely packed together. 60 meters. A dazzling fire like the sun lit up from the body of the silver spear, and the surrounding rainstorm instantly evaporated into nothingness. Li Tianlan raised the spear over his head. The fire rushed into the sky. 50 meters. Li Tianlan's joints suddenly shook, and a sound like a dragon's roar spread in his body. Li Tianlan raised the long spear high, made a standard throwing gesture, and threw it hard. The spear with all his strength was thrown out directly. The fire all over the sky broke out in an instant. It was raining heavily in Dongdu. But there was only fire on the battlefield. With the human emperor as the core, endless fire was released almost unreservedly. The fire was raging and violent, and the sky within a radius of tens of meters turned into a fiery red in an instant. The silver spear burst forward. It crossed a distance of 50 meters. With an almost eternal violence and majesty. It was like the power of heaven and earth. Boom. The tip of the spear was inserted into the intake grill of the off-road vehicle in front with a large fire. The off-road vehicle, which had a speed of more than 120 kilometers per hour, suddenly stopped. The next second, the whole car was lifted by the huge force. The car flew into the air, the top of the car was down, and it smashed into the Toyota behind. The fire was raging all over the sky. The two cars kept retreating under the almost exaggerated power of the long spear, and finally collided with the third car behind. The engine kept roaring. The three cars crowded together and retreated for 7 or 8 meters. In the raging fire, the off-road vehicle, whose front had been completely deformed, swelled slightly and exploded directly with a loud bang. Thick black smoke rose amidst the flames. The three cars exploded one by one, like 3 groups of fireworks, which was indescribably spectacular in the heavy rain. Miyamoto Xianxia jumped out of the car with his assistant at the first time, but the other elites in the 3 cars were obviously not so lucky. They were all buried in the fire in the explosions one after another. Li Tianlan's figure had disappeared. Miyamoto Xianxia's face was gloomy and indifferent. The assistant who mocked Li Tianlan the most in the car just now looked around nervously. The power of this spear seemed to be in the fire-flaming realm, but in terms of power, it had surpassed countless thundershocking realm experts. How could he be a master of the fire-flaming realm? He was simply a monster. Priest Miyamoto, could he have such strength? The assistant suddenly trembled, and his face was more pale and desperate. Miyamoto Xianxia stood quietly in place. His eyes were dignified and serious. He did not look around, but stared at the fire caused by the car explosion in front of him. The heavy rain fell. The fire was gradually suppressed. The billowing smoke rose. A figure with a silver spear walked out of the rolling smoke and fire, not fast or slow, but the killing intent was soaring. The smoke and fire rose behind him. Li Tianlan's eyes were cold and deep, and the extremely condensed killing intent was slowly released from him. Under the smoke and heavy rain, he stood with a spear, like a god of war. "Who are you, Your Excellency?" Miyamoto Xianxia was instantly covered with lightning. Countless electric arcs crackled and flowed on him. His body stopped more and more, and his momentum soared. Miyamoto Shiny Eye? Li Tianlan lifted the spear and asked softly. His tone was soft and calm, even with a hint of unreal smile, cold and illusory. Miyamoto Shiny Eye felt more and more dangerous. The huge sense of oppression was like a wildfire occupying all his senses. The lightning on his body became more and more dazzling, but he did not dare to move. In the headquarters, he was right. Other commanders were no match for Li Tianlan. But what he did not expect was that even he seemed to be no match for Li Tianlan. He took a deep breath and said reluctantly, "Your Excellency." Before he finished his words, the old priest's eyes had contracted instantly. Li Tianlan's long spear had been raised. The flames raged in the heavy rain, and the human emperor weighing hundreds of kilograms slammed down with the dull sound of wind and thunder. After a full spear, Li Tianlan's will and fighting intent had been at the real peak state. In this situation, there were pursuers in front and behind, and Li Tianlan was too lazy to talk nonsense. "Finish it quickly." Li Tianlan stepped forward with the spear and attacked wildly. Holy thunder! Miyamoto Shiny Eye, who had already been fully prepared, did not hesitate and directly used the unique skill of Amaterasu Shrine. His hands shook, and a giant sword made of ice appeared in his hands. Inside the ice sword, there was lightning. Miyamoto Shiny Eye held the sword above his head with one hand, facing Li Tianlan's long spear, and did not retreat half a step. Bang! The spear collided with the sword, and countless ice chips flew. The ice sword was smashed by the spear without any suspense. Fire and lightning flew out at the same time. Li Tianlan's figure had strode into the messy light and shadow, and a spear swept. The silver spear danced like a dragon. The horrible killing intent broke out under the rain. Li Tianlan's eyes were shining, and his every move showed a kind of determination and madness to tear everything. Wherever the silver spear went, there was nothing that could not be destroyed. Miyamoto Shiny Eye's hands condensed into a shield. The light shield was broken under the spear. The electric knife had not yet been raised, and wherever the silver spear passed, the blade had dissipated. Countless long swords made of lightning condensed into a formation behind Miyamoto Shiny Eye and rushed straight to Li Tianlan. Under the heavy rain, the silver light whistled, and the spear body opened and closed. One after another, the long swords burst under the silver spear. Countless lightning rushed to Li Tianlan, but they were swallowed by the fire. In the fire, the silver spear kept moving forward. It kept moving forward. Fire flaming suppressed thunder-shocking realm. And it was an absolute suppression. Domineering spear, domineering person. Li Tianlan seemed to have completely gone mad. His offensive was getting faster and faster, with a kind of almost invincible madness and domineering, destroying everything and suppressing everything. Miyamoto Shiny Eye's counterattack was getting weaker and weaker. One after another, the lightning passed through the flame, and a small amount of lightning hit Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan looked cold and hard, and he did not retreat. Miyamoto Shiny Eye, who was getting more and more embarrassed, looked desperate and ruthless, and his body, which had no way to retreat, suddenly stopped. Gotcha! The silver spear fell without any pause, ruthless and ruthless. The extremely heavy spear body fell on Miyamoto Shiny Eye's shoulder with the fire. Miyamoto Shiny Eye screamed fiercely, and one of his arms was smashed down by the spear and fell to the ground, dripping with blood. At the same time, Miyamoto Shiny Eye endured the severe pain and roared with resentment, "Amaterasu! Amaterasu!" The strongest unique skill of Amaterasu Shrine. There was thunder rolling down in the sky. Blood sprayed from Miyamoto Shiny Eye's shoulder. Before one of his arms fell to the ground, his body had suddenly swelled up. The unprecedented bright lightning condensed in front of him, and finally turned into a dazzling ball of light like a star. Miyamoto Shiny Eye's face was ferocious. The unique skill Amaterasu. The strongest unique skill was also the unique skill with the greatest cost. This move was equivalent to self-destruction. Once this move was used, even if he could survive this battle, there was no hope for Thundershocking Realm. It was already a great luck to be able to maintain in the fire-flaming realm. But it was better than death. Go to hell, bastard. Miyamoto Shiny Eye sneered. The arm that left his body finally fell to the ground. The light ball surrounded by infinite lightning was pushed out by Miyamoto Shiny Eye with one hand. The light ball instantly expanded, burst, and formed a large light curtain, covering Li Tianlan's whole body. Li Tianlan stood with the spear. He took a step forward. Starting from his feet, the fire on his body disappeared instantly in the lightning. Countless lightning fell on him, and in the blink of an eye, his body was torn into pieces. Miyamoto Shiny Eye did not look at the result and turned to escape. A figure with a silver spear appeared directly behind him. At the moment when he turned around, the two looked at each other. You. Miyamoto Shiny Eye instantly felt cold. The power is good, but can't you find where I am? Li Tianlan, who changed positions with the shadow at the critical moment, smiled and raised the long spear. There were two shadows exactly like Li Tianlan appeared in front of Miyamoto Shiny Eye, and at the same time, they raised the long spear. Li Tianlan looked indifferent and said softly, "Crack." Buddhist incantation of 9 words, crack formula, the first in single lethality and outbreak. 3 long spears pierced into Miyamoto Shiny Eye's chest at the same time. Li Tianlan's body disappeared. 2 shadows rushed through Miyamoto Shiny Eye's body. Bang! In the dull sound, Miyamoto Shiny Eye, who was covered with blood, shook slightly, and his body suddenly burst into countless flesh and blood. Chapter 144. As a country with a large population but severely limited military power, the existence of the Dark World could be said to be in line with the interests of East Island. In this paranoid and serious country, the people here might be crazy, perverted, or disgusting, but the almost rigid paranoia made many people in this country have a kind of toughness that ordinary people didn't have. So East Island never lacked superiors. Grandmaster of Kendo, Grandmaster of Saber, Supreme Ninja God. In every generation of East Island, these 3 titles had never been vacant. That was to say, in hundreds of years, even when East Island was at its lowest, there were at least 3 superiors of the invincible realm in the country. But East Island's martial arts were too extreme, close to the devil's path. When people were young, they excessively squeezed people's potential, but they couldn't get an effective supplement. So although East Island never lacked superiors of the invincible realm, few of them could be in the top of the divine list. Even the number 1 superior of East Island today, Tianhai Wuji, the Grandmaster of Kendo who used saber, was only in the top 10 of the divine list, and there was still a long way to go to the top 5. But East Island didn't care about this at all. In the world, it could be said that it was the country that paid the least attention to individual heroism. What they needed were superiors of the invincible realm, but not absolute superiors who were invincible in the world. In this country's idea, only teamwork was invincible, just like a pack of wolves. Superiors of the invincible realm were like the Wolf King. With the ferocious and cunning wolves, such a team could play a much more important role than a single person on any occasion. This was the idea of East Island. The whole special warfare system of East Island was like a complete machine, and the superiors of the invincible realm were the most critical engine. But even if the superiors of the invincible realm weren't there, the machine could still operate at the fastest speed. In the heavy rain in Dongdu, with the chaos on Takeshita Street in Shinjuku, the whole Dongdu took action at the same time. A large number of elites and superiors began to gather on Takeshita Street. High-performance vehicles rushed out of the rain one after another, faster and faster. The headquarters villa on Takeshita Street was already a pool of blood. 5 commanders of the fire-flaming realm all fell in the command room, and everyone died with their eyes wide open. And Li Tianlan, who rushed into the headquarters villa, had disappeared. But orders were still passed down through the headquarters one after another, precise and clear, but in fact, they were meaningless. Time difference. After a perfect counterclockwise murder, Li Tianlan also created a time difference without any loopholes. After rushing out of those alleys that seemed to be hidden but were actually traps, no one would have thought that Li Tianlan would be so crazy that he not only didn't break out of the encirclement, but still went to the depths of Takeshita Street to kill. His going against the flow was equivalent to leaving countless East Island elites who blocked him in front of him behind. And with the speed of his charge, it was enough to make most of the East Island elites burst into tears. For Miyamoto Xianxia, Li Tianlan attacked with all his strength without reservation. After a moment of confrontation between the two sides, when the elites of East Island arrived at the scene, Li Tianlan had already rushed to the headquarters. The back of the street was the place where the masters gathered. Although there were ordinary elites, the number was too small. Such a small number caused some trouble for Li Tianlan, but it could not stop him from breaking out of the encirclement at all. The entire line of defense behind the street was scattered and almost collapsed by him. In the heavy rain, Li Tianlan broke out of the encirclement calmly and disappeared. Until it was confirmed that Li Tianlan had left Takeshita Street, Bai Yuming, who had been paying close attention to all this, was still beating violently. Li Tianlan's action was completely beyond her expectation. But all this seemed crazy in the eyes of others, but in his heart, it was his absolute confidence in his own strength. Fire-flaming realm. This kind of abnormal fire-flaming realm made by Yuming, a real genius of the thunder-shocking realm, a little numb. According to the information she got, Li Tianlan was still in the chi-controlling realm, not even the peak. Could it be that a month of special training could really make him break through two realms? How was this possible? But it was obviously not the time to investigate Li Tianlan's realm. Li Tianlan got away safely. Bai Yuming didn't even scold him, but calmly asked, "Tianlan, what's your next plan?" "Go to Ninghu." Li Tianlan calmly said, "Kill Dubian Xiangyu." Dubian Xiangyuan. Bai Yuming was silent for a while. If she remembered correctly, Dubian Xiangyuan was also a very important figure on the hunting list in Li Tianlan's hand. His importance was even no less than that of Miyamoto Xianxia. Li Tianlan now obviously picked the most difficult bones to bite. This person is not easy to kill. Bai Yuming thought for a while and said slowly, "It will be more difficult to kill him in the future." Li Tianlan's tone was calm. Everything on Takeshita Street tonight indicated that the special warfare system of East Island had been invaded by hostile forces. The lists in the hands of the three young heavenly sons of Xianxia State were extremely targeted. As long as the East Island government was not stupid, it could know their purpose with a little speculation, and then it could also have an idea of who they might want to kill. Before the East Island government intended to protect those important figures, Li Tianlan had to get rid of the most difficult bones. Otherwise, with their status in East Island would send heavy troops to protect them, and the possibility of him succeeding would be much lower than now. Bai Yuming said no more, but calmly said, "You now have about half an hour to evacuate Shinjuku. We have just successfully invaded the headquarters of Takeshita Street and are issuing false orders, but East Island will soon find something wrong. Leave quickly before they surround Shinjuku." Li Tianlan said yes, walked to a black car on the roadside, and reached out to pull the door. Crack! The locked door was suddenly pulled open by him with one hand. The alarm sounded. Li Tianlan carried the sky attack behind him, got into the car, and left quickly. In short, be careful. You can give up the task when you can't do it. Your life is more important than the hunting task in many people's hearts. Bai Yuming chuckled, and her tone gradually became cold. Rushi participated in the second batch of hunting with other members of your East Emperor Palace, and she paused and said with a smile, "It's time for us to act. We can't let you young people risk your lives outside." Li Tianlan was silent. Obviously, the thunder-shocking realm experts of Xianxia State, who were still in Azure Pool Hot Spring, gave the hunting task to the young people, not because they wanted to watch the show, but because they also had their own tasks. The black car moved forward in the heavy rain. Li Tianlan held the steering wheel and kept accelerating. The heavy rain and strong wind. The waves in Dongdu were monstrous, and they were about to spread to the whole East Island. At the same time, in the central area of Dongdu under the heavy rain, in a seemingly ordinary clubhouse, the raging fire burned everything fanatically. An ordinary-looking young figure was now emitting sword light all over his body. He held a sword in one hand, and the sword light kept splashing in the twisting fire. The blood all over the sky drifted from the enclosed area of the clubhouse to the quaint courtyard, and there were corpses all the way. The young man with an ordinary face looked calm. More and more people besieged him. The young man swept all the way and was about to approach the door. The young man, who had been killing silently all the time, suddenly roared, and his voice shook the sky. His body instantly soared into the sky in the heavy rain. The fire in the air surged wildly, and a large number of lights and shadows rose to the sky. The young man let go. He abandoned the sword. The long sword didn't fall, but strangely hung in the air and kept spinning. In an instant, all the long swords beside the countless corpses on the ground floated up with the young man. Dozens of swords. Hundreds of long swords rose at the same time and danced violently with the young man's body as the core. The sharp killing intent tore the rain curtain, and the dense sword formation fell like raindrops. The unique technique of Kunlun City. The 8th style of 10 skills of true martial arts. The 8th supreme sword move. Infinite sword light shuttled around the young man's body, and countless drops of blood floated in the crowd. His figure had rushed out of the door and quickly disappeared in the rain. The sword intent surged in the air. A dangerous and sharp sword intent whistled up and down in the garden full of blood, and it didn't disperse for a long time. The sword formation that was still suspended in the air fell down neatly after a full 2 minutes. The bright sword edge sank into the blood and rain, and there was no longer any elegance. Chio District, Dongdu. In a secret base less than 5 kilometers away from the East Island Imperial Palace. The sword light soared to the sky. A white-clothed figure had already practically vanished amidst the boundless sword lights, and only sword insight that grew stronger and stronger ceaselessly shot out from the numerous fountains of blood that shot into the sky, and it carried a sort of unparalleled fierceness and arrogance. Groups after groups of East Island elites rushed up fearlessly, but they were beheaded in a large area of sword light. The sword light flew out unscrupulously, with a kind of invincible and peerless sharpness, getting faster and faster. A clear and warm Japanese voice rang in the night rain, and the sound of fighting, soft and playful. Miyazawa, how long are you going to hide? The elites of your East Island nation are almost all dead. Behind the crowd, a short, long-faced middle-aged man clenched his fists tightly. Between his fingers, the bright lightning kept flashing, and gradually condensed into a gloomy and horrible spear. But he never made a move. On the battlefield, his men were getting fewer and fewer, but he never got the chance to make a move. The East Island nation is invincible. Miyazawa roared and raised his hand instantly. The spear in his hand was getting brighter and brighter, and it was about to leave his hand. Infinite power kept condensing on the spear in his hand, and the lightning was dazzling. He was still waiting for a chance to kill with one blow. The enemy who suddenly appeared tonight was too terrible. It seemed that he didn't care to sneak in at all. He ignored thousands of elites of their base and directly killed his way in from the gate. The large area of sword light poured down with thunder, and the violent and cold killing intent even made him, a thunder-shocking realm expert, tremble. He had to wait for the best opportunity. Miyazawa took a deep breath, suppressed his inner impulse, and watched silently. Invincible? In the crowd, a faint smile rang out. Well, let me see how you cannot be defeated. In the constantly flowing blood, the bright and unparalleled sword light suddenly condensed. In the next second, the young man, who had been killing the enemy with his strength since the beginning of the war, finally showed his realm. A shocking thunderbolt seemed to pierce the ground directly from the sky. On the giant sword that was waving a large area of sword light, the dazzling thunderbolt suddenly bloomed with countless electric lights. At that moment, Miyazawa saw the giant sword in the young man's hand. It was a giant sword with a broad blade of nearly 2 meters. It looked heavy and steady, with a kind of almost violent dominance and power. The moment the giant sword appeared in Miyazawa's pupils, the electric lights rushed up to the sky. Miyazawa suddenly screamed, turned around, and ran. He didn't even have the courage to make a move, and ran away directly. He knew that sword. He also knew this unique skill. The famous sword of the Wang family of Beihai, Firmament. The unique skill of the Wang family of Beihai, sword listens to thunder. Behind him, countless electric lights connected heaven and earth. At least dozens of elites were turned into a pile of charcoal in the blink of an eye. Before the sword light disappeared, Wang Xingxiao's body had directly shortened the distance between him and Miyazawa. He held the giant sword Firmament, which was a little terrifying, in one hand and raised the other hand. An electric arc bloomed in his hand. Wang Xingxiao's palm suddenly fell. The unique skill of the Wang family of Beihai, deceiving Taoist sword. The tiny electric arc instantly extended to a distance of tens of meters, but the tiny arc seemed to illuminate everything in the base. The electric arc lit up in an instant and disappeared in an instant. Only a ray of light pierced through Gong Zei's body, which was covered in electric sparks. It was like a rainbow piercing through the sun. Miyazawa's body slightly stiffened. In the next second, his body instantly exploded, and the flesh and blood all over the sky directly evaporated in the high temperature. Only a piece of black ash fell on the ground and was instantly washed away by the rain. At 3 o'clock in the morning, the 3 attacks in Shinjuku District, Chiyo District, and the central area completely shocked the whole Dongdu. The Prime Minister's residence, the Imperial Palace, and the military all got the news. The Dongdu Self-Defense Force was safe and sound. But all the dark forces of East Island in Dongdu all took action to trace the whereabouts of the murderers of the 3 attacks. Under the wind and rain in East Island, wild waves suddenly rose. Chapter 145. It was the 3rd hour after the 3 murders in Dongdu. In the heavy rain that had lasted for a day, 2 Toyota SUVs drove out of the downtown area of Dongdu and headed for the Holy Mountain in the southwest of Dongdu with a clear purpose. The Holy Mountain was called Hibiscus Peak. It was close to the Pacific coast and covered with snow all year round. It was one of the symbols of the whole East Island and one of the largest active volcanoes in the world. It was the Holy Mountain in the hearts of all the people of East Island. The Divine Wind Force, the central organization of the Special Warfare System of East Island, was located on the Holy Mountain. The 2 off-road vehicles followed the mountain road all the way up. As the height rose, it seemed that even the rainstorm had lessened a little. In the distance where the mist was dense, the snow-covered Hibiscus Peak looked elegant and holy. However, against the backdrop of the night, there was an additional trace of gloomy beauty. The vehicles entered the mountainside, made a turn, and drove into an area that was not open to tourists on weekdays. Then they continued to go up. After 500 meters, the first sentry post appeared. Sentinels in special white military uniforms that almost blended with the snow raised their guns and stepped forward. The windows of the 2 cars were rolled down. Facing the sharp and vigilant sentinels, the driver did not show his ID, but only showed 2 badges. One was luxurious and the other was ancient. The sentinels, who were on guard, stood up straight and saluted reflexively. Without saying a word, they waved their hands to let them go. If these 2 badges appeared in front of ordinary soldiers, 9 out of 10 people would not recognize them. But here was the Divine Wind Force, the power center of the Special Warfare System of East Island, the headquarters of the most powerful and elite Special Warfare Force in East Island. For everyone here, these 2 badges were worth dying for. The luxurious badge represented the office of the Prime Minister, and the ancient badge represented the royal family. Even if a beggar held these 2 badges, they would unreservedly offer their loyalty, even their lives. The SUVs moved forward side by side. After passing 2 more sentry posts, a snow city appeared in front of the 2 SUVs. This was indeed a city in the snow. Although the city walls were extremely short, through the rain and snow, the inside of the city walls could be said to be vast. In the center of the short city walls was a tower up to 6 or 7 meters high. On the tower, the 2 Japanese characters, Divine Wind, were as red as blood and looked very eye-catching. There were very few guards on the city wall in the heavy rain. In the center of the city gate below the tower, a figure in a tight black suit with a headscarf on his head stood quietly. He carried a katana on his back. In the white snow, The black figure was clear and blurry. At first glance, he looked like a statue standing at the city gate, ancient and silent. The two off-road vehicles that were about to enter the city stopped abruptly. The car door opened. Two middle-aged men from East Island, who looked to be in their 40s or 50s, got off at the same time and walked quickly to the black figure in front of the city gate. Huge snow stepped on the snow, making a crisp sound. In front of the city gate, the black figure in black clothes suddenly opened his eyes. An indescribable sense of danger suddenly burst out from him. It was not a horrible sword intent, but a kind of tenacity and gloominess that made people breathless. His eyes were bright, but the light was extremely obscure. As the light flowed, it seemed to be full of blood and darkness. The two middle-aged men who were about to walk in front of him froze and subconsciously stopped 10 meters away. "Your Highness Miyamoto, why are you here?" A middle-aged man whispered in surprise, with undisguised respect in his tone. Shinichi Miyamoto, the palace master of Liohua Palace in East Island, the commander-in-chief of the Divine Wind Force, and the only supreme ninja in the martial arts world of East Island. Shinichi Miyamoto, who was in charge of the Divine Wind Force all year round, unexpectedly appeared outside the city gate in the heavy rain tonight. Obviously, he was not here to welcome them, even if they were representing the Mikado and the Prime Minister. Waiting for someone. The bright light in Shinichi Miyamoto's eyes gradually became peaceful. He stood still, letting the heavy rain fall, and said in a hoarse voice, "Matsushita and Zwaha came here late at night. Is it an order from His Majesty and the Prime Minister?" In recent years, because of the existence of Night Spirit in East Island, the Divine Wind Force didn't have many opportunities to go out to carry out tasks directly. Shinichi Miyamoto was not very familiar with the two men standing in front of him at this time, but he could vaguely remember their names. These two men didn't have any actual positions in the Imperial Palace and the Prime Minister's residence, but they were one of the most important aides of the Mikado and the Prime Minister. They came to Divine Wind in the rain late at night, so something important must have happened. "Yes, Your Highness Miyamoto. Something important happened in Dongdu tonight. His Majesty and the Prime Minister think it's time for the Divine Wind Force to serve East Island." Song Xiaoying lowered his head, and his tone became more and more respectful. As the confidant of the Mikado, he looked ordinary and plain, and he had a scholarly air about him that matched his identity as an aide. He was like a senior scholar, which made people feel very comfortable. He was less than 50 years old this year, and among the aides of the Mikado, he was really young and vigorous. All the information showed that within 5 years, Song Xiaoying was very likely to become the chief of the aides of the Mikado. In the whole East Island, he could be said to be a very important figure. Shinichi Miyamoto was calm and collected, and his eyes were as calm as snow. He lowered his eyelids and became quiet again. When this supreme ninja of the invincible realm was motionless, not to mention his momentum, even his vitality seemed to be completely restrained, like a dead thing. "Your Highness Miyamoto, a few hours ago, there were murders in Chiyo District, Central District, and Shinjuku District. We have confirmed that, including Miyamoto Shiny Eye, 3 superiors of the Thundershocking realm have been killed in their own districts, more than 10 superiors of the Fire-Flaming realm died, and countless ordinary elites were killed and injured. There were 3 murders. At present, we can confirm that the one who killed Miyazawa Xiong in Chiyo District is Wang Xingxiao, the heir of the Wang family of Beihai. And the one who appeared in the Central District is very likely to be Gu Hanshan, the heir of Kunlun City in Zhongzhou State. We can't confirm the murderer in Shinjuku District yet. We found some videos in Shinjuku District, and we can only confirm that the murderer is also a young man, but the specific identity is unknown. Zhuo Hengxin, who came from the advisor group of the Prime Minister's residence, said in a cold tone. Different from Song Xiaoying, who looked very kind, Zhuo Hengxin's face was gloomy, and his momentum was extremely cold. Although the advisors of the Prime Minister's residence did not hold specific official positions, they often handled some administrative affairs for the Prime Minister. After staying with the Prime Minister for a long time, Zhuo Hengxin naturally had an unusual momentum. But at this time, standing in front of Shinichi Miyamoto, the supreme ninja of heaven, all his domineering and elegant demeanor were deliberately restrained. The Wang family of Beihai? Zhongzhou State? Shinichi Miyamoto suddenly opened his eyes and subconsciously took a step forward. The snow under his feet was pockmarked by the rain, but the place where Shinichi Miyamoto originally stood was flat, not even a footprint, leaving no trace in the snow. Xianxia and Xianxia bowed at the same time. If that's the case, things will be very troublesome. Shinichi Miyamoto took a deep breath and said slowly. The aura that he had restrained to the extreme was released slowly, as if endless darkness was falling on the holy mountain. The darkness swallowed the snow and the rain, and the whole world seemed to be in darkness. Shinichi Miyamoto looked serious. Xianxia and Xianxia also looked serious. If things were really as they thought, then this time it was more than troublesome. Zhongzhou State was going to change dramatically. The governor of Samsara challenged the god of war of Zhongzhou State, which had attracted the attention of the whole world. Currently, a large number of masters and elites of East Island had all gone to Zhongzhou State. East Island's special warfare force and master teams were in a state of fatal weakness. Did Zhongzhou State still have the power to plot against East Island at this time? Wang Shengxiao, Gu Hanshan, they were the famous young heavenly sons in the whole dark world. And the third person who appeared in Shinjuku tonight, was he a hidden figure of the young generation of Zhongzhou State? Was everything that happened tonight a small, individual operation? Or a prelude to a large-scale invasion? If it was just a prelude, then it could only mean that when countless masters of East Island sneaked into Zhongzhou State, a large number of elites of Zhongzhou State also entered East Island. Once the speculation was established, Shinichi Miyamoto's face suddenly turned darker. Everyone thought that Zhongzhou State was going to change dramatically. Under such circumstances, Zhongzhou State still dared to send forces to East Island, which could only mean that it was impossible for Zhongzhou State to change dramatically. The master of Samsara Palace and the god of war of Zhongzhou State would fight, but they wouldn't fight to the death. Samsara and Zhongzhou State conspired against East Island? What about the two invincible realm masters and a large number of experts who had entered Zhongzhou State? The rain was pouring heavily. Shinichi Miyamoto felt cold all over. Investigate. The supreme ninja of East Island stayed silent for 5 minutes, and then said in a cold tone, investigate the movements of the 12 supermasters of Samsara and all the entry and exit records of East Island in the past month. The young heavenly sons of the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City entered East Island, and I'm afraid there are a lot of elites of Zhongzhou State with them that we haven't found. We have to find out. The divine wind force will be dispatched immediately. Mr. Xianxia, Mr. Zhuhe, what's the order of His Majesty and the Prime Minister? Xianxia paused and said slowly, His Majesty and the Prime Minister mean that we must control Wang Shengxiao, Gu Hanshan, and the young man who committed murder in Shinjuku. These three are likely to be the core of the next generation of the special warfare system of Zhongzhou State. If the worst happens, they will be very important hostages. Shinichi Miyamoto nodded expressionlessly and said, the divine wind force is qualified for this task. In addition, tell His Majesty the Mikado and the Prime Minister that I suggest waking up the Kusanagi force immediately, just in case. The faces of the two top aides from the Imperial Palace and the Prime Minister's residence changed dramatically, but they didn't dare to say anything. They hurriedly turned around, got on the off-road vehicle, and left quickly. Both of them felt that it was ridiculous to wake up the Kusanagi force, but it was obvious that Shinichi Miyamoto's sense of crisis was much stronger than theirs. They had to convey this very important suggestion to their master as soon as possible. Shinichi Miyamoto watched the two off-road vehicles leave. He forcibly suppressed the urge to go back and give orders, and quietly waited where he was. The storm was howling in the air. In a very distant place, the rain seemed to tilt slightly and then stop. Shinichi Miyamoto's eyes froze, and he remained calm. The rain all over the sky seemed to be getting smaller and smaller, and finally disappeared completely 1 second later. The storm was still raining heavily in front of the city, but there seemed to be a domain around Shinichi Miyamoto, and all the rain disappeared without a trace. Miyamoto, long time no see. A soft and almost demonic voice rang out, echoing between the snow and the storm, misty and uncertain. Shinichi Miyamoto suppressed his inner agitation and said flatly, "You're the #1 killer on the killer list. Now that you've come to the divine wind force, don't you dare to show up in front of me? Oh, provocation doesn't work on me. This is the divine wind force, and Miyamoto has opened his domain. I have to keep a low profile. Although it's a little rude, I believe Miyamoto can understand, right?" The evil and soft voice continued to ring out, echoing softly between heaven and earth. The #1 killer in the dark world and the only killer of the invincible realm, codenamed Evil. No one knew why he showed up in East Island, not even Shinichi Miyamoto. However, the supreme ninja of East Island obviously didn't have the patience to say more. He said impatiently, "Evil, if you have anything to say, just say it. I don't have time to chat with you here." Heh. In the void of the rainstorm, Evil's voice echoed in Shinichi Miyamoto's ears. "It's just a small matter. I want to invite Miyamoto to Xianxia State to help me kill someone. What do you think?" Shinichi Miyamoto's heart skipped a beat, and then he sneered, "Why should I help you? An inexplicable request. What if I say that the person I'm going to kill this time is completely in the interest of East Island?" Evil's voice seemed to be a little lower. "Once this person dies, the Samsara Palace will. The Wang family of Beihai, Kunlun City, and Sai City will all fall out with each other. Maybe this is what you want to see, right?" Shinichi Miyamoto was expressionless, but his eyes narrowed. "I didn't know there was such a person in Xianxia State. I didn't know before either. According to my employer, he only appeared recently. He's just a young ant." Evil smiled and said calmly. Shinichi Miyamoto's patience was wearing thin, and his eyes were getting colder and colder. He did not have any friendship with Evil. It was inexplicable that Evil came to him. Moreover, Evil was a young nonentity that had just appeared, but it was related to the balance of the superpowers in Xianxia State. Could it be more ridiculous? And even if there was such a person, how could Evil find him? It was illogical. "Are you done?" Shinichi Miyamoto frowned and said slowly, "Don't think what I said is absurd. You should think about it. The person I'm going to kill is a nonentity, but the person behind him is not to be underestimated. Even I don't have the confidence to escape unscathed if I act alone. Miyamoto, the reason why I found you is not only to invite you to Xianxia State, but also to cooperate with Tianhai Wuji and Lusheng Zhangquan through you. There's also an invincible realm expert and even a murderous weapon to cooperate with us. 5 invincible realm experts and a murderous weapon. Do you think it's a joke?" Evil said calmly, "The reason why I found you is that I like your ninjutsu. But what I value more is that the 2 invincible realm experts in East Island are in Xianxia State now. If this cooperation is successful, it's definitely a win-win situation. If it fails, we'll be doomed eternally. I can guarantee the authenticity of every word I say with everything I have. It depends on whether your empire of East Island dares to gamble for the fate of the country." "Of course we dare." Shinichi Miyamoto sneered. "But why do I think you dare to gamble for such a dangerous plan?" Evil sighed softly and said leisurely, "Anyone will go crazy for a reward of $10 billion, right? Maybe I can retire completely after what I did last night." $10 billion. Shinichi Miyamoto's heart shook fiercely. If what Tribulation said was true, it was enough to prove that the person he killed on this trip was really not a small matter. And how could a force that could pay $10 billion to kill a person be ordinary? A young nonentity who was related to the overall situation of Xianxia State? Shinichi Miyamoto took a deep breath and said calmly, "Who is this person?" "The new young heavenly son of Xianxia State, Li Tianlun." Evil was silent for a while and chuckled. "The wind and thunder veins with unlimited potential. If I can end my last assassination with his blood and life, it will be perfect." The new young heavenly son? Li Tianlun? Wind and thunder veins? Shinichi Miyamoto's eyes twitched slightly. At this moment, he suddenly thought of the information brought by Song Xiaoying and Zhuahengxin. Wang Shengxiao appeared in Qiu District. Gu Han appeared in the central area. He appeared in Shinjuku district. He narrowed his eyes slightly and murmured to himself, "Can it really be such a coincidence?" P.S. Well, I have to brace myself and tell you something. As the new year approaches, I'm really a little busy, so I have an idea. Last night, I told the readers in the group that during the new year, I will update once a day, which is a normal update. After the new year, I will update twice a day. Can the heroes and heroines accept this? Things are different now. Before I got married, my parents could understand my writing work. But now that I have a wife and a child, things are really different. So, this year, I really want to spend time with my family. Since I started my new book, I even have less time to sleep with my wife. I should spend time with my family before the new year and pay my New Year's greetings a few days later. I can probably update on the 5th. Chapter 146. Heavy rain poured over Dongdu. Ninghu, a few hundred kilometers away from Dongdu, had a sunny day. At 9 o'clock in the morning, Lianlan, who was dressed in sportswear and had become a young mute again, pulled an excessively large suitcase and walked slowly on the clean and tidy road of Ninghu. He looked like a young man traveling alone. He was ordinary and did not attract any attention along the way. The warm sunshine in the morning quietly sprinkled all over the city, making it warm and comfortable. Li Tianlan, who had abandoned the temporary car 20 kilometers away from Ninghu, walked aimlessly. When he passed by a hotel that did not look high-end but was very clean and exquisite, he stopped, thought about it, and finally walked into the hall. After checking in, he dragged his luggage upstairs. Because he had a fake but extremely realistic fake identity and a lot of yen to clear the way, although he played the role of a mute, the whole process was extremely simple and smooth, without any accident. Li Tianlan's economic suite was on the 3rd floor, a height that would not embarrass him no matter what happened. The East Island-style suite space was ordinary, but it was extremely clean and elegant. The only drawback was that it was close to the block. Although the sound insulation was good, the outside world still seemed to be a little noisy. But Li Tianlan was very satisfied with the current environment. After a fierce battle, what he needed most now was to rest from Dongdu, where it was raining cats and dogs, to the sunny Ninghu. At 9 o'clock in the morning. If there was no accident, he could sleep until dinner time and even enjoy the world-famous Ninghu beef, and then continue to carry out hunting tasks in the dark and windy night. Throwing the suitcase aside, Li Tianlan sat on the tatami with a calm expression and took out a list again. On the list, 4 names, Sanluan Tingjing, Miyamoto Xianxia, Takeda Akino, and Nakamura Akame, had been drawn with a horizontal line. For Li Tianlan, it was a sign that the 4 people were dead. The remaining 26 people were his next hunting targets. Among the 4 lists that had been completed, Sanluan Tingjing and Miyamoto Xianxia could be said to be the targets that Li Tianlan deliberately went to hunt, while the remaining 2 were unexpected surprises. They were both killed by him when he rushed into the headquarters on Takeshita Street. Both of them were in the ordinary fire-flaming realm, but their positions were important. One was in charge of logistics, and the other was in charge of intelligence, so it didn't take much effort to kill them. With the death of these 4 people, the government of East Island's plan to take over all the forces of Night Spirit in East Island would undoubtedly be thwarted. Many people might not realize anything now, but as the hunting continued with the advancement of the 3 young heavenly sons of Zhongzhou State, the whole East Island would realize what kind of people they were hunting. At that time, not to mention whether someone would actively fight for the positions left by Night Spirit, even some people in the headquarters of Night Spirit who didn't want to be incorporated and lose their autonomy might have some other thoughts. Light a cigarette. Li Tianlan took a deep breath, put aside the matter of Dongdu, and began to study the list in front of him. In Ninghu, Li Tianlan was in charge of hunting for 3 people, and the most important one was Dubian Xiangyun. Unlike the people of the Dark World and the personnel that the East Island government temporarily sent to take over Night Spirit after the destruction of Night Spirit, Dubian Xiangyun had always been an important figure in Night Spirit, and he was also a very famous figure in East Island and even the world. Of course, Dubian Xiangyuan's fame was limited to some specific fields, such as genetics and biology. He was one of the most famous doctors in genetics and biology in the world. On the list in Li Tianlan's hand, Dubian Xiangyuan's strength was ordinary. In terms of the difficulty of assassination, it was not more difficult than killing Miyamoto Xianxia. But the credits awarded by the Sky Academy were 200 more than Miyamoto Xianxia, which showed how valuable the head of this top doctor was. Li Tianlan silently stared at the name of Dubian Xiangyu. After a long time, he unfolded the map of Ninghu that he took in the hotel and determined the location of this action. Sensoji in the western suburbs of Ninghu. This was the address given in the information given by Han Shixuan. It was very detailed but also very vague. This ancient temple with a long history in Ninghu was the secret research institute presided over by Dubian Xiangyuan, but there was no mention of this research institute in the information. Sensoji was the only clue about Dubian Xiangyuan. A cigarette was about to burn out. Li Tianlan's fingers gently tapped on the map, without saying a word. Sensoji was about 50 kilometers away from the urban area of Ninghu. Judging from Li Tianlan's current location, there were at least a dozen roads leading to the destination. The traffic was very convenient, which also meant that Li Tianlan would not have too big a problem to retreat after he succeeded. But the biggest problem now was not how to retreat, but how to enter the Biological Research Institute under Sensoji that he did not even know the name of. Li Tianlan looked at his watch and hesitated. He did not know if he should go to Sensoji first. Sensoji in Ninghu was one of the tourist attractions. If he went there during the day, even if he could gain something, it would be extremely limited. He pinched out the cigarette butt and gave up the idea of going to Sensoji. He lay on the tatami and closed his eyes to rest. When he was half asleep, the phone in the suite rang. Li Tianlan frowned, turned over and continued to sleep. Time flew by in a trance. About an hour later, the sound of knocking on the door suddenly came from outside the door. The rhythm was very light, and it sounded a little cautious. Li Tianlan, who slept very lightly but deeply, opened his eyes immediately. The silver human emperor had slipped out of his cuff. Li Tianlan was expressionless. When he was about to ask who it was, he suddenly realized that he was now a mute. He narrowed his eyes slightly, stood up quietly, walked to the door and opened it. An East Island girl, who looked about 27 or 28 years old, stood in front of the door and looked at Li Tianlan. She blushed and seemed to be a little nervous. This was a woman who could be regarded as extremely beautiful in most people's eyes. Her hair was dyed a very simple and elegant gray, and the outline of her face was soft and charming. She wore a tight waist shirt, which completely showed off her slender waist and plump chest. She wore a short skirt, seductive mesh stockings on her tender white thighs, and a pair of black stilettos on her feet. A faint fragrance floated into Li Tianlan's nostrils. The woman's small hand was holding a delicate and simple lady's bag, and she whispered, "Is this the service you ordered?" It was a very soft and coquettish Japanese, which sounded a little sweet and charming. Li Tianlan frowned slightly. He couldn't speak, so he just shook his head coldly and was about to close the door. "Please wait a minute." The woman's face seemed to be a little panicked. She stretched out an arm to stop Li Tianlan, bit her lip and whispered, "Sir, I'm very clean and I'm a wife. My skills are very good, and I can definitely make you happy. If you're not satisfied with me, Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes slightly, suddenly opened the door a little, and motioned for her to come in. The woman was stunned again, and subconsciously looked at Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan pointed to his mouth, indicating that he couldn't speak, and stood in the door to make way for her. The woman hesitated a little, held the lady's bag in her hand, and stepped into the bedroom with a fragrant wind in her high heels. The woman entered the room, put the bag aside, turned around, bit her lip, looked at Li Tianlan, and said softly and obediently, "Shall we start now?" Her face was flushed, and she looked anxious and shy. "I can use my mouth first. I'd better take off my clothes first." Li Tianlan nodded with a calm expression. The woman seemed to be a little shy. She turned around and bowed her head to unbutton her shirt. Her long hair hung down, revealing a section of her tender white neck, which looked extremely attractive. Li Tianlan walked over and gently stroked her neck. The woman's body stiffened, and her face became redder. Her palms, which were unbuttoning, trembled slightly. Nice appearance, but you have killing intent. Li Tianlan's voice suddenly sounded in the quiet room, where only the woman's rapid breathing was left, and he spoke in perfect Chinese. Before he finished his words, the face of the woman, who bowed her head to unbutton her shirt, had changed dramatically. As soon as Li Tianlan said, "Nice," she suddenly turned around. In an instant, Li Tianlan's palm pressed against her neck, but he caught nothing. The third button on the woman's shirt was unbuttoned. She reached out with both hands and had taken out 2 daggers glowing with a strange green light. "Turn around." Li Tianlan had just finished his words. Both of them were extremely fast. The moment the woman turned around, the human emperor in Li Tianlan's hand had slightly wrapped around her body. It was not a spear or a sword. The slender spearhead stuck out the metal copper. The human emperor directly turned into a dagger. The human emperor thrust. Swish! Before the woman's figure with the 2 knives in her hand stabilized, the human emperor thrust had been fiercely stabbed into the woman's abdomen. Li Tianlan's expression was cold, and the human emperor turned slightly. Crack! In the crisp sound of metal, the human emperor thrust trembled slightly, and the blades on both sides of the spearhead stretched directly into the woman's body. Li Tianlan's hands were always stable, and his eyes were fierce and cold. In an instant he directly pulled out the dagger. In an instant, there was a huge strange-shaped hole in the woman's abdomen, and blood gushed out of her mouth. She stared at Li Tianlan with a pair of eyes that were originally soft and affectionate but now full of ferocity, and said, You have too many doubts. Li Tianlan said flatly, "I told you, you have killing intent." He raised his eyebrows slightly, looked at the woman in front of him, and asked, "Do you know the Heavenly King Heart?" The woman's eyes were full of understanding. She took a deep breath, let the blood gush out of her body, and pounced on him without hesitation. The fire in the room instantly bloomed, but it was not a blazing orange, but a very strange kind of pale green. Her body swelled up rapidly, and in the blink of an eye, she seemed to be several times bigger. In the expanding body, there was a muffled sound in her body, and the whole person exploded in an instant. The pale green flame was completely out of control in an instant, madly devouring everything in the room. Countless green juice burst out of the woman's body, completely enveloping Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan's body shook. Countless green juice passed through his body. But Li Tianlan's real body had already appeared behind the woman. He pulled up the large suitcase in the room that contained the sky attack. Without hesitation, he strode a few steps, broke the window, and jumped directly from the 3rd floor. In a messy sound of breaking, Li Tianlan dragged the suitcase to the ground with countless broken glass. Behind him, the green flame with strange light and shadow had spread and burned all over the 3rd floor. Li Tianlan straightened up and began to run without looking back. He carried a huge suitcase, supported himself with one hand, stepped over the roadside railing, and rose into the air. A silver-white Lexus drove across the road in an instant. Li Tianlan stomped hard on the roof of the Lexus. Shadow formula transposition. In the next second, Li Tianlan had already appeared on the other side of the road. He carried the suitcase and left the scene at full speed without stopping. Until his figure appeared on the other side of the street, around the hotel, some figures that seemed to stay nearby unintentionally suddenly came to their senses. Chase. In a subconscious silence, a cold and resolute voice suddenly sounded. At the main entrance of the hotel, a middle-aged man in a suit and leather shoes, who looked like a business elite, tore off his suit jacket. His figure flashed, and almost in the blink of an eye, he crossed the whole block and chased after Li Tianlan. In the full sprint, he took out a walkie-talkie and said quickly to the other end of the walkie-talkie, "Target confirmed. Blue sportswear, carrying a large suitcase, silver hair. All teams pay attention to interception and block this block." He paused and sped up again, saying, "Get the helicopter." Li Tianlan carried the large suitcase and walked like the wind, constantly changing positions with the shadow formula. In a few minutes, he was getting farther and farther away from the pursuers behind him. But he didn't relax at all. Instead, he became more and more serious. East Island. At this moment, he realized that he still underestimated the power of the East Island Special Warfare System. From Dongdu to Ninghu, a distance of hundreds of kilometers. In less than 12 hours, the East Island Special Warfare System had already locked his position. Needless to say, now that he was running away, Wang Xingxiao and Gu Hanshan must be in a bad situation. It was really not so easy to fight with the special warfare system of a country. To put it simply, after the initial hunting, they were exposed. The street was full of people. Li Tianlan quickly passed through a block. Vaguely, there seemed to be more and more figures blocking his way. They passed through from all directions, and in a very short time, they seemed to have surrounded Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan's eyes were cold. He held the human emperor tightly in his hand and was about to fight his way out. In his ears, the roar of a car engine had sounded quickly. A black Mercedes-Benz rushed over in an almost reckless manner, knocking down 2 East Island residents on the side of the road, and finally stopped in front of Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan subconsciously narrowed his eyes. Chapter 147. Get in the car. I can help you. Li Tianlan instinctively froze for a moment. The woman in the back row of the Mercedes-Benz looked about 26 or 27 years old. Her face was charming and soft, and her whole body was full of a mature and intellectual dignity. The streets of Ninghu were already in chaos. Countless elites of the special warfare system of East Island were rushing over from different directions, and some of them even took out weapons. But the woman in the car was always calm and looked at Li Tianlan with extremely sincere eyes. The woman's voice was soft and sweet, but the sweet Japanese fell into Li Tianlan's ears, and after being translated into Chinese, it became a mechanical and rigid tone. She was from East Island. This was the first thought that came to Li Tianlan's mind. In the chaotic street, inside and outside the car, the two people looked at each other. The next second, without any hesitation, Li Tianlan opened the door and sat in the car. The black Mercedes-Benz roared, and the sudden speed made Li Tianlan's body stick to the seat behind him. The whole car seemed to fly in an instant, and the ground of the car seemed to be lowering. The scenery on both sides of the window kept going backward and became blurred. Vaguely, Li Tianlan saw through the dashboard that the speed of the Mercedes-Benz had exceeded 150 miles per hour in just a few seconds. As a bumpkin who knew nothing about cars dozens of days ago, Li Tianlan couldn't imagine what kind of violent modification this car had gone through to have the performance that was even more exaggerated than most supercars. The Mercedes-Benz dashed left and right in the traffic on Ninghu Street. The performance of the car was good, and the driver was obviously a professional. Li Tianlan only felt that the car kept swaying on the street, and the huge car shuttled through the gaps in the traffic in a very dexterous manner. In just a few minutes, Li Tianlan had been farther and farther away from the place where he had just been besieged. The scene outside the window was still going backward quickly. Li Tianlan looked at the dashboard in front of him. The speed was 302. Damn it, this speed is almost like flying. The scene on the street gradually changed from noisy to quiet. Along the clean road, the Mercedes-Benz continued to move forward. The woman, who hadn't taken the initiative to speak since Li Tianlan got in the car, finally turned her head, looked at Li Tianlan, and said with a smile, "Thank you for your trust, Mr. Li. You made the best choice." Li Tianlan glanced at the woman and said nothing. Trust? This was complete nonsense. The reason why Li Tianlan dared to get in the car was that he could be sure that even if the worst happened, he could still escape. The car sped along the way, but neither the driver nor the woman beside him noticed that as the car continued to accelerate, there was always a patch of crystal clear and even water following the Mercedes-Benz. After entering the ice-condensing realm, Xuehua was Li Tianlan's shadow. As long as there was any danger, Xuehua would turn into his shadow and switch places with Li Tianlan. The whole process didn't even take a second. If he hadn't had great confidence in his own safety, he wouldn't have easily trusted the woman beside him whom he had never met, even if he had fought his way out. Let me introduce myself. My name is Shi Tianmingzi. Mr. Li can call me Ming Zi. The woman smiled gently and reached out a small hand to Li Tianlan. I don't think I need to introduce myself? Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows slightly and shook Shijian Mingzi's hand. She called him Mr. Li as soon as she opened her mouth. It seemed meaningless whether he introduced himself or not. Of course. Shijian Mingzi's eyes were coquettish, and there was a kind of obvious fanaticism and worship in them. It was a kind of charming look that people knew was fake, but it could make people believe it. The third young heavenly son of Zhongzhou State, Li Tianlan of Sai City. Almost everyone in East Island who should know about your current identity already knows about it. Of course, that includes our Shitian clan. Li Tianlan's heart suddenly sank, but he didn't show any panicked expression. At times like this, he had to be calm. He calmly glanced at Shitian Mingzi and said with a smile, "You moved fast enough." "It's not difficult," Shitian Mingzi said indifferently. "After all, this is East Island. I can only say that we didn't expect Zhongzhou State to have such a big plan. If I'm not mistaken, you three young heavenly sons are only part of it. Zhongzhou State, there should be a large part of the elites that have secretly sneaked into East Island, right? So, the chaos in Zhongzhou State that the Dark World cares about, and the challenge of the Lord of Samsara City to the God of War of Zhongzhou State, is just a hoax, right?" Li Tianlan was expressionless and said nothing. He didn't know much about this kind of thing. Even if he knew all about it, he had no comment. Mr. Li, Shijian Mingzi frowned. Her frown was very subtle, which made her look more delicate and charming. "This problem is very important to Shitian clan, so please tell us the truth." She sat in the car, bowed deeply, and said softly and respectfully, "Please. In return, I will tell you a very important news. Believe me, this news is very important to you." Shijian clan? Li Tianlan heard the surname again and felt it was more and more familiar. He frowned thoughtfully. "My father is Shitianingji," Shijian Mingzi said softly. Shitianingji. Li Tianlan's heart skipped a beat, and he suddenly became enlightened. He had indeed heard of this clan and this name. Before the hunting operation began, Han Shishuan emphasized on introducing this name. The name Shitian clan, in Han Shishuan's mouth, was Shitian Financial Group. It was one of the youngest consortiums in East Island and the largest ATM of Night Spirit in East Island. With the destruction of Night Spirit, the Logistics Department of the Divine Wind Force and the Ministry of Finance of East Island had sent officials to Shitian Financial Group and were negotiating with Shitianingji. This was all the information Li Tianlan got. Li Tianlan's eyes flickered. If the identity of Shijian Mingzi was true, then there was no doubt that East Island, the youngest world-class consortium, had been a little restless after the destruction of Night Spirit. At least, they were not willing to accept the status quo that the consortium was controlled by the Divine Wind Force and the Ministry of Finance. That was why Shitian Mingzi contacted him. Is the situation in Zhongzhou State so important to Shitian clan? Li Tianlan smiled. So what if that battle is true? So what if it's false? Shitian Mingzi gently bit her pink and tender lips. In the case of asking for help, she had no initiative at all. She could only lower her eyes and say, "After this battle, if the master of Samsara Palace is safe and sound, Shitian Financial Group is willing to provide economic support for Samsara." Li Tianlan suddenly turned his head and looked at Shitian Mingzi with burning eyes. Shitian Mingzi also looked at him with a firm look. Shitian Financial Group provided economic support for Samsara? What did this mean? Treason? Li Tianlan looked at the woman beside him for a full minute, then slightly raised his eyebrows and said, "In fact, long before the destruction of Night Spirit, my father had begun to apply for Swiss citizenship. We just left Night Spirit, not treason. For many years, Night Spirit has been trying to get out of the control of the East Island government. His Highness Tianxin moving the headquarters to Billy State is a good example. Night Spirit and East Island seem to be in harmony, but the fight in the dark is extremely cruel." Shitian Mingzi whispered. Li Tianlan's eyes had narrowed tightly. Vaguely, he seemed to have grasped some of the core veins of Zhongzhou State's plot. But the idea flashed in his mind, and then it became untraceable. "Go on." His body leaned against the seat and he said calmly, "After the destruction of Night Spirit, from the perspective of the cabinet, the first thing they want to get is Shitian Financial Group. At present, the negotiation between the government and the family is still going on. If there is no accident, the government will buy nearly 50% of the shares of Shitian Financial Group at a very low price and become the first shareholder of the consortium. Everything of Shitian clan will shrink countless times. My father has been serving Night Spirit in recent years, and in the secret game between Night Spirit and East Island for many years, my father has offended a lot of people. Once the control of Shitian Financial Group falls into the hands of the government will definitely be happy for other forces to hit Shitian Financial Group when it is down. At that time, what awaits us will be a disaster." Shitian Mingzi whispered, "So we are willing to choose Samsara. Samsara Palace is a force that has just risen in the dark world in recent years, but the Palace Master is a real super expert and the boss most worthy of our service. If the battle between Her Highness and the God of War of Xianxia State is false, then it is true that Samsara and Xianxia State conspired against East Island. In other words, Samsara is also one of the super forces in the dark world that least needs to care about East Island. Such a force is most likely to be willing to accept Shitian Financial Group." Li Tianlan was silent. After a long time, he looked out of the window and said calmly, "You made the right choice." He couldn't fully trust Shitian Mingzi now, but it didn't matter to give her some signals that were irrelevant to the overall situation. Shitian Mingzi's eyes lit up slightly, and she keenly grasped the information contained in Li Tianlan's words. She bowed deeply again and said seriously, "Thank you, Mr. Li." She paused and said again, "We know that you have a very close relationship with Boss Qin of Samsara. If you can, I hope you can help Shitian Financial Group to reach a cooperation with Samsara. Please." Li Tianlan didn't say anything, but chuckled and said, "Miss Mingzi, I remember you just said that you would tell me a very important news for me, yes?" Shitian Mingzi's face tightened subconsciously. She took a deep breath and lowered her voice, saying, "Tianlan, you must be careful in the next action. At present, the Divine Wind Force has all gone down the Holy Mountain and is tracking down all the infiltrators from Xianxia State to East Island. You, Wang Shengxiao and Gu Hanshan are the top priority of the Divine Wind Force. Your assassination target is too obvious. Combining some of the dead people, some people have concluded that Xianxia State wants to attack everything left by Night Spirit in East Island. Unfortunately, the Divine Wind Force has already made targeted arrangements for these situations." She took a deep breath, and her plump chest swelled slightly. The invincible realm expert in East Island, Supreme Ninja Shinichi Miyamoto, even suggested the Mikado and the Prime Minister to directly wake up the Kusanagi force, but they refused. But I have a really reliable news that His Highness Shinichi Miyamoto is likely to personally carry out the obliteration plan this time. The 3 young heavenly sons of Xianxia State are all on his obliteration list, and you, if the intelligence is correct, you should be the first on His Highness Miyamoto's obliteration list. An invincible realm expert personally carried out the obliteration operation? Li Tianlan subconsciously tightened his body, and his expression was solemn. "Tianlan, if I'm not mistaken, you came to Ninghu to attack Sensoda, right?" Shitian Mingzi sighed softly and continued, "I don't know if your country's intelligence infiltration is not thorough or if there are other reasons. I just want to say that if you act alone in Sensodra, you will almost certainly die. You should have a list in your hand, right? If the person who gave you this list knew a little about Sensodra, he would not have let you carry out this action." She paused and said calmly, "The other party obviously doesn't intend to let you go back alive." Li Tianlan smiled, but subconsciously clenched his hands. The one who gave him this hunting list, it was Yi Fengqing, the general of the Southeast Group. "Is there anything special about Sensodera?" Li Tianlan asked. "You're tuning in to the Wandering Hero YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.